Hey guys! Tonight, we step quietly into the moonlit canyons of Petra. Yes, that Petra, the so-called lost city carved straight into glowing red sandstone. You've seen it on postcards, or maybe in a certain fedora-wearing archaeologist movie. But tonight, we're not here for the tourist version. No, you're about to wander the alleys. Most people miss. Feel the chill of the desert air wrap around your ankles and wonder just why the walls here seem to breathe. You're arriving under a silver sky. The stars above Jordan are sharper than you've ever seen, pricking the heavens like they're trying to escape. You've just passed through the Siku, that winding sandstone slit that leads to Petra's famous facade, and it's darker than you expected. Your torch flickers against rock walls, painted by a million years of minerals, blood red iron, sunny ochre, even the faintest lapis blue. The silence is so complete, it almost hums. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from somewhere far from Petra, like Saskatchewan or Singapore, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where in the world you're falling asleep from. Now dim, the lights maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your footsteps crunch softly along the ancient stone path. Petra isn't built, it's revealed. You don't walk into it so much as peel it open. Every turn feels like a secret. Overhead, carved high into the canyon walls, the treasury suddenly appears like a god emerging from a cliff. It's enormous, it's theatrical, and it's probably not a treasury, but we'll get there. First, let's go further in past the postcard. The streets narrow, then widen, then collapse into courtyards half swallowed by sand. Petra doesn't present itself all at once. It lets you in like a dream slowly, with escalating weirdness. As you move forward, small carved niches appear in the walls. You might miss them if you're not looking carefully. Some still hold remnants of incense or bone. Were they for gods? Spirits? Just practical storage? Historians still argue whether they were devotional altars or part of a long-lost calendar system. In Petra, almost every stone has two meanings, the obvious one and the Nabataean one. You reach a fork in the path. To the left, there's an alley that seems to descend. A trick of the light. You check your torch. No, it's a real incline, barely noticeable but intentional. You follow it. Here the air feels cooler. A faint mineral scent hangs in the silence, like wet pottery. The Nabataeans mastered passive cooling techniques centuries before it became a Pinterest trend. They could chill entire rooms using underground airflow. In fact, you're probably standing on top of one right now. Somewhere behind you, a rock clatters. Nothing visible, just a goat or gravity doing its thing. But still, you quicken your pace. Now you pass carved tombs. Not grand ones like the treasury, but modest, almost domestic. And here's the strange part, they're mixed in with actual homes. Imagine living in a cozy stone-cut dwelling next door to, well, a crypt. Historians still puzzle over this arrangement. Did the Nabataeans believe death and life should cohabitate? Was it spiritual or just economical real estate? The moon's higher now. You glance upward and notice just how narrow the sky is here. Petra pulls you inward, keeps you enclosed like a thought you haven't finished yet. If you had to guess, you'd say the canyon walls are 40, maybe 50 meters high. But it's hard to tell in the dark. Everything echoes just slightly. Even your breath sounds borrowed. You pause by a strange little stairway chiseled into the rock. It seems to go nowhere, just a dozen steps, than a sheer wall. Why build it for a lookout, a platform for announcements? Or maybe it led to something that's gone now, erased by time, or looters, or simply the wind. Petra is full of these stairs to nowhere. One archaeologist compared them to deleted paragraphs in a stone novel. You sit on one for a moment. The stone's cold, but smooth. You can almost imagine a Nabataean child perched here 2,000 years ago, listening to their parents barter over spice prices. This city wasn't always a ruin. It was alive. At its height, Petra buzzed with camel caravans, perfumed merchants' gossip, and goats. Always goats. One of your sandals slips slightly on the sand-covered step. You chuckle quietly to yourself. It's almost too peaceful. But Petra, like any ancient city, had its dangers. Rockfalls, bandits, royal purges. At one point, the city even had an elite guard who answered only to the high priest, not the king. That always ends well in history, doesn't it? The breeze picks up. Sand whirls into tiny ghosts flickering past your torch. You stand again and press forward. Past this bend, something changes. The ground is flatter, wider. You've entered the main ceremonial courtyard. You can't see the whole thing, but its scale is unmistakable. Ahead, faint outlines of columns, some standing, some toppled, create a rhythm of shadows. This is where major rituals happened. Some of them, frankly, sound unhinged. There are records fragmentary, written centuries after the fact, of a festival involving sacred fire, rhythmic chanting, and a symbolic marriage between a masked priest and the spirit of Petra itself. Historians still argue whether this was metaphorical, religious theater, or something else entirely. You pick up a fragment of pottery near your foot. It's worn reddish, possibly Nabataean. They were expert potters, probably because water storage was life or death here. Many of their jars had tiny, almost invisible inscriptions inside. One even reads, according to a German archaeologist, to the one who remembers. Creepy, yes. Or maybe comforting. You're not alone in your curiosity. Finally, your torchlight catches something at the very edge of the courtyard. A narrow stairway carved directly into a steep rock face, barely wide enough for one person at a time. And it goes up, straight up, into darkness. This, you realize, is the trail to the high place of sacrifice. We'll tackle that in the next section. But before you begin climbing into sacred mystery, and probably questionable ancient hygiene, take one more moment to look around. Even half buried in dust, half swallowed by time, Petra holds on to something. Not quite memory, not quite myth, but something between the two. Something you only feel at night when the canyon breathes. Before you climb those steps, let's talk about your calves. You're about to engage muscles you didn't know you had, and in sandals no less. The Nabataeans didn't believe in handrails and this ascent. It's not for show. Locals say the higher you go, the thinner the veil between worlds. You're not sure what that means yet. But as the stairway narrows and the stars wheel silently above, you begin to get the feeling Petra wasn't built for comfort. It was built for awe. You begin your slow, deliberate climb to the high place of sacrifice. The steps are irregular. Some are barely the size of your foot. Others force you to raise your knee nearly to your chest. You move in a zigzag pattern, the torchlight bouncing against canyon walls that seem to close in tighter the higher you go. The air is thinner here, not just because of the elevation, but the stillness. The silence is heavy, as if something is listening. Halfway up, you stop to breathe. A warm breeze brushes your cheek. From this height, even in darkness, you can sense the layout of the city below a web of road shrines and forgotten chambers tangled like veins in stone. Petra is sometimes called the brain in the rock. Stand here long enough, and you start to believe it. Finally, you reach the top. The rock flattens into a wide open platform. It's been carved carefully ritually. The Nabataeans didn't just hollow out tombs and houses, they shaped mountaintops into temples. This one is one of the most mysterious. The high place of sacrifice. Its name alone makes you pause. But there's little blood here now, just the sound of the wind brushing sandstone. At one end of the platform, you see two rectangular obelisks, each about 2 meters tall. They rise from the stone like sentinels. These weren't just decorative. Scholars think they represent gods, or rather, the presence of gods. They were part of a Nabataean tradition of Aniconism worship without physical depictions. No sculpted faces, no painted idols. Just shape shadow and space. You walk slowly to the platform's center. A basin has been carved directly into the rock, round deep and too smooth to be accidental. This was likely used for liquid offerings. Wine water blood. Historians still argue whether human sacrifice ever took place here. Some insist the Nabataeans were peaceful ritualists. Others point to ancient inscriptions warning of gates that open both ways. Interpret that as you will. And then there's the drainage system. At one corner of the platform, an elegant narrow channel directs overflow off the mountain's side. That's not incidental. That's architecture with purpose. Whatever they poured here, whether symbolic or less symbolic, they made sure it flowed with dignity. You walk the perimeter, careful with each step. The drop is sharp. There's no railing, no barrier. It's said that once a year on a specific lunar date, a priest in white would stand right at this edge, chanting until the stars realigned with the city's core. Myth. Probably. But Petra makes you believe in myth. Something catches your eye, scratches in the rock, too shallow to be writing, too purposeful to be natural. Could it be a calendar? A ritual path? A prank carved by an ancient teenager trying to impress their date? Nobody knows. Archaeologists catalog such marks with phrases like uncertain ceremonial significance, which is academic for we have no clue, but it sounds spooky. You sit near one of the obelisks and let the silence settle. High above the city, the wind sings through distant canyons. There's no traffic here, no electricity. Just you, a forgotten altar, and the ghosts of people who once stood here with purpose in their hearts. Suddenly, you realize the obelisks are casting twin shadows that converge in front of the basin. Even in moonlight, Petra aligns itself. That's the kind of city this is. Every rock, every crevice, every echo, it all points somewhere. Down below, the treasury glows faintly from reflected moonlight. From this angle, it's not majestic, it's haunting, as if it's watching you. You remember something you read earlier in the day, scribbled in an old traveler's journal from the 1880s. The writer claimed he saw a procession here, hooded figures, in utter silence, moving in perfect synchronicity, leaving no footprints. Was it hallucination, performance, or just a very committed group of Sufi dancers? The account was dismissed for lack of evidence. But standing here now, your skin prickling, you're not so sure. On your way down from the high place, the stairs feel different, more treacherous, as if Petra's testing you. Each step downward echoes faintly, and your torch starts to wane. That's when you hear it. A trickle of water. You stop. Impossible, right? It hasn't rained in weeks. You hold your breath listening. The sound is faint, but it's there, like a hidden stream, laughing behind the rock. You follow it. Off the main stair path, there's a narrow shelf, half trail, half guesswork. You move carefully. The sound grows louder, and there it is. A stone channel just wide enough for your hand runs along the canyon wall. It's ancient, carved with obsessive precision, leading from the upper cliffside toward a cistern below. Water cool and clear dribbles gently through it. This is Petra's secret magic. The Nabataeans didn't just survive in the desert. They engineered it. They created pressure systems, gravity-fed aqueducts, rock filters, even hydrologic clocks. Some of these channels stretch for miles, hugging cliff faces, cutting under mountain paths, and arriving precisely where needed. One archaeologist called it the world's first known municipal plumbing system. Except it was prettier. You follow the water down to a small cistern, almost invisible from the main trail. It's shaped like a teardrop and smells faintly of moss. You dip your fingers in. Cold. Not icy, but cold enough to surprise. This water has likely been moving through rock for hours, maybe days. Above the cistern is a carved panel. No figures, just grooves and a hollow. Some believe it's a sundial. Others think it marked seasonal rainfall. Or perhaps it was symbolic Petra's way of saying, water is sacred, and it's ours. You rest here for a while, letting the quiet wrap around you again. Suddenly, the myth of Petra shifts in your mind. It's not just a city, it's a machine. A breathing, whispering machine of stone and silence built to outlast kings and weather and empires. And it has. By the time you rise and begin the walk back to the main trail, your torch is almost out. That's okay. You know the way now. And Petra knows you too. As you descend from the heights of sacrifice and silence, a question follows you like the echo of your own footsteps. How did a desert people not only survive, but thrive here, surrounded by cliffs, wind, and sun-scorched sand? The answer lies not in their gods, nor their rituals, at least not entirely, but in something far more mundane and miraculous plumbing. Yes, before we plunge into bazaars full of spice gossip and bizarre taxes on elephants, and yes, that's coming, you'll first uncover how Petra did the unthinkable, how it tricked the desert into obedience. Your torchlight flickers, barely keeping pace with your thoughts as you rejoin the main path. Around you, the walls widen again into a gently sloping canyon. But now, you're seeing Petra differently. Not just a lost city, but a brilliant system of concealed infrastructure. Beneath your feet, water once flowed. Not in streams or puddles, no, that would be messy. The Nabataeans were far more elegant. You spotted a faint groove running alongside the ancient road. At first, it looks like erosion, but then another groove appears, then another. They form parallel lines, converging toward a rocky outcrop with deliberate symmetry. You kneel and run your fingers over the stone. It's smoothed by centuries of water. This was part of Petra's lifeline, the hidden aqueduct system. The Nabataeans mastered hydraulics like few others in the ancient world. Long before Rome sent water leaping through marble arches, Petra's engineers were carving channels into cliffs, crafting ceramic pipe systems, and building dams to capture flash floods. They even built one-way valves to prevent backflow, because nothing says desert genius like anticipating a problem that might only happen once a year. A little further down, you find one of the cisterns. It's not flashy, just a squat stone basin, half covered by a rock ledge. But it's cool to the touch. These were Petra's secret reserves, filled quietly by underground pipes during the rare rainfalls. When drought came, as it often did, the city wouldn't panic. it would pour. You continue walking, and suddenly you notice a shift. The landscape changes from sacred solemnity to something more lively, more social. You're entering the market quarter. Picture this. It's a sweltering afternoon in first century Petra. You're standing in a long stone corridor, shaded by overhanging cloth awnings. Merchants shout in half a dozen languages. Donkeys bray. Someone's definitely frying something garlicky and delicious. The smell of incense leather, and let's be honest, sweat fills the air. You are not alone. You weave through invisible crowds listening. At one stall, a merchant is haggling with a trader from the Persian Gulf over the price of cinnamon bark. At another, two Nabataean women are arguing gently but firmly about the going rate for saffron. Gold coins clink somewhere behind you, and someone definitely just slipped a fig into their pocket and kept walking. Petra was more than a trading post. It was a middleman's dream. Positioned at the crossroads of Arabia, Egypt, and the Mediterranean, it handled spices from India, textiles from Syria, glass from Rome, and probably gossip from everywhere. This wasn't just a place to buy goods. It was where merchants traded news ideas and deeply questionable rumors. Take the famous elephant tax. You overhear it now? Two men laughing about it in the shadow of a spice stall. 3 silver coins per elephant, even if it doesn't sneeze. And if it sneezes twice, you pay double. That's the rule. Historians still argue whether the elephant tax was real or just an ancient joke repeated until it fossilized into folklore. But records suggest Petra levied creative tolls depending on the rarity size and yes sound of the animal. Camels passed for one rate, horses another, elephants. Well, they were loud large, and probably more trouble than they were worth. You duck into a shaded alcove where carved benches still line the walls. This would have been a meeting place, maybe for traders settling disputes, or officials issuing permits. Petra's administration was surprisingly bureaucratic. They issued transit tokens, weight stamps, and water access vouchers. And yes, there are rumors of secret bribes tucked inside hollowed pomegranate jars. A bit dramatic, but this is Petra. You're starting to notice something odd, though. Many of these structures seem multi-purpose. A shop front that might double as a sleeping chamber. A public bench built with hidden compartments. An awning pole that looks suspiciously like it once held a banner of state. Petra didn't just build spaces, it built ambiguity. And then there's the money. The Nabataeans minted their own coins, small, mostly bronze, featuring stylized portraits of kings with names you've never heard, and profiles that definitely leaned into weird uncle territory. One coin even shows a king with a deeply skeptical expression, as if to say, really, you want to buy that with this? Despite all the wealth, Petra was careful. Hoarding wasn't the norm. Water was more valuable than gold in community trump display. It's said that a rich man who built $2,000 a home risked being quietly mocked with a goat left at his doorstep, an ancient way of saying, you're showing off and it smells. As you pass what remains of a bustling square, something else becomes clear. This market wasn't just commercial, it was theatrical. Look closer at the architecture. Some columns are tilted not by time, but design. Doorways framed at odd angles that force you to enter sideways. It's possible Petra intentionally disrupted symmetry to keep visitors off balance, and therefore impressed. You round a corner and find yourself in front of a tall stone wall. Carved into it are shallow niches, some shaped like doorways, others like small temples. They're empty now, but once they held figures' offerings, and tiny tablets inscribed with prayers. You lean closer to one. The Nabataean script dances along the edge in delicate curling lines. It's a Semitic language, read right to left, but scholars still struggle with parts of it. Some inscriptions are mundane, property of a Sorkon, keeper of bolts. Others are stranger. One, half faded, seems to say, "May the silence guard the price agreed." Was it a trader's curse, a legal contract, or something more spiritual nobody knows? You continue your walk, and the path slopes downward again. Ahead, the walls open into another wide space. At its center is a strange structure, half theater, half temple. This, you realize, is where things start getting truly weird. But that's for next time. In the next section, you'll ascend again, this time, not into the heavens, but into the darker corners of Petra's spiritual world. Mountain tombs, hooded priests, and rituals nobody writes about anymore. For now, listen to the hush that's returned. Even in its busiest days, Petra knew when to go quiet. And you, lucky wanderer, are starting to understand why. Let's be honest so far. Petra has shown you its elegant side, its clever water systems, cosmopolitan spice stalls, and even a touch of bureaucratic whimsy. But now things are about to get darker, literally and figuratively. You're about to leave the sunlit courtyards and descend into the echoing silence of Petra's mountain tombs. Before long, the path will lead you into a chamber where the air feels older than memory, and where cloaked priests once stood whispering secrets you were never meant to hear. But first, you need to climb. The city falls behind as the canyon narrows once more. You step carefully on a steep path that winds up into the cliffs. Loose stones slip under your sandals. Somewhere above, a hawk calls out a sharp cry that dies against the rock. Ahead, the cliffs rise in layered bands of rose copper and ash. Petra's stone isn't just beautiful, it's stratified like memory pressed into geology. The route you're on now doesn't appear on any modern map. In fact, you almost missed it, half hidden behind a collapsed pillar and a pile of goat droppings. Yes, goats again. They're everywhere, and you're beginning to suspect they know more than they let on. As you climb higher, you notice how quiet it's become. No wind, no birds. Just your footsteps and the faint crunch of sand. The walls curve around you, forcing you into a kind of spiral until finally, after a final scramble up a carved ledge, you emerge onto a ledge overlooking nothing but air. And there it is. Cut into the vertical cliff face is a small doorway, no taller than your shoulder. You crouch and step inside. Instant temperature drop. The air is cool still and scented faintly with something metallic. You shine your torch around the chamber and see that it isn't a room, it's a tunnel. Narrow, man-made, curving left into the rock. Its walls are smooth, too smooth to be natural. This wasn't a dwelling. It was a passage. You follow it. It bends, rises, drops again, and eventually opens into a high-ceilinged chamber. The floor is swept clean, the walls carved with shallow alcoves. In each, the ghost of a statue, eroded features, missing limbs, some reduced to bare outlines. These were once sacred figures, perhaps gods or guardians. At the far end stands something more intact, a single column flanked by two carved animals. One resembles a jackal, the other a serpent with flared nostrils and a human face. You pause. This is not the Petra you've seen in books. These gods are older, stranger. They don't match Greco-Roman styles or even mainstream Arabian deities. Scholars still argue whether this chamber predates the Nabataeans or represents a syncretic faith that blended local desert cults with Egyptian, Mesopotamian, and even Proto-Himalayan iconography. That last theory was proposed by a particularly enthusiastic Swiss historian and has since been quietly ignored. Still, you wonder. Your torch flickers against a carved inscription, a ring of symbols, each surrounded by 7 dots. Some say it's a solar calendar. Others insist it's a ritual marker. And a fringe theory naturally claims it's a star map aligned with a comet that passed over Petra sometime in the 1st century CE. There's no proof, but the alignment would have looked incredible. You step forward into the middle of the room. A circular depression marks the floor. It's perfectly centered, as if something once stood here, a brazier perhaps, or an altar. And here comes the eerie part. The acoustics. When you shift your weight, your footfall echoes not once, but 3 times. There's a faint reverberation, as if the chamber is responding. Petra's builders were acoustic engineers too. They understood how to shape sound to create a mood, whether for intimidation, devotion, or both. This space was designed for ritual. But what kind? There are no written records, only hints. A Greek traveler in the 2nd century CE described a Petra ceremony where men of black veils chant to the hollow god who eats no incense. Historians generally believe he was drunk or poetic, but you're standing in a chamber where that description suddenly feels literal. You move to one of the alcoves. Inside is a half-faded carving, human-like seated arms outstretched. But instead of eyes, there are hollow circles. Instead of a mouth, a flat line. It's faceless and watching. Was this a priest? A god? A symbol of surrender? The truth is no one knows. The Nabataeans left no theological treatises, no instruction manuals, just these shapes, these shadows. And the strangest part, you feel calm. This chamber, with all its unease, feels balanced, as if it was built not to glorify something terrible, but to contain it. Not a temple, perhaps, but a seal. Time to leave. You retrace your steps, emerging once again onto the high ledge overlooking the canyon. The sun has shifted. It's early evening now. Shadows stretch long and low. Below, Petra begins to glow, the red stone catching gold light in a way that makes it seem alive. And now, you understand something fundamental. Petra wasn't carved for tourists, for armies, or even for trade. It was carved for gods, or something very close. You descend slowly, careful not to slip, and return to the main path, heart still humming with the hush of that chamber. You pass another niche, a simpler one this time, and notice the remains of a mosaic floor just beneath it, barely visible, but unmistakably deliberate. 4 interlocking rings, a pattern repeated nowhere else in Petra. No one knows what they mean. And yet, you feel as though Petra just showed you something it doesn't show often. As twilight deepens, the city prepares for night. The sounds change. Fewer goats, more whispers of wind. Somewhere in the distance, a flute plays faint echoing. It might be a trick of the canyon, or it might not. In the next section, you'll explore the strange hybrid gods of Petra, creatures with human arms, and bird heads, lion-bodied protectors with the faces of merchants, and one especially strange cult that may have come from the sea. It gets weirder, but now you're ready. Because Petra doesn't just hold secrets, it whispers them. You've wandered markets, scaled sacred heights, and stepped into tombs that hum with ancient hush, but Petra still has more to unveil. You've seen what the city did. Now it's time to meet who it served. Gods, or something like them. In the next passage of your slow journey, you'll walk among altars of serpents, climb to sanctuaries shaped like lions, and peer into the eyes of deities that blur the line between beast and man. But beware, the Nabataeans weren't big on labeling. These weren't your tidy pantheon gods. They were wild hybrid and sometimes unnervingly blank. And that's what makes this next path so strange. The route takes you east of the main colonnaded street where tourists seldom tread. The cliffs here are lower, but the stone darker, richer in iron maybe, or just weighed down with memory. You pass a crumbled arch that once marked the entrance to a ceremonial zone. Its keystone bears a faded sunburst, a Nabataean symbol scholars think meant the watching fire. Creepy, yes. Accurate. Also, yes. To your right now is a long stone wall carved with dozens of shallow niches. Most are empty, but a few still cradle weathered statues. Only fragments remain. A snout here, a hoof there. One figure barely intact has the body of a seated woman and the unmistakable beak of a falcon. This is the realm of Dushara and Al-Uzza, the two primary deities of Petra. But to describe them like that is almost misleading. They weren't gods in the Greco-Roman sense. They didn't have neat origin stories or firm boundaries. They were symbols, presences, impressions carved into space. Dushara, whose name means Lord of the Shara, mountains, was the city's patron. He's usually represented as a block. Yes, a literal cube of stone, sometimes decorated, sometimes plain, always upright. Worshippers didn't kneel before a golden statue, they approached a geometric slab in total silence. There are dozens of these beetles across Petra, some no larger than a loaf of bread, others towering monoliths. You find one now nestled in a cave no bigger than a modern living room. The air is cold, the stone is smooth. No face, no arms, no inscription, just presence. And yet, you feel watched. That was the point. The Nabataeans believed Dushara didn't need a body. His power radiated from shape and space. Some beetles were carried in processions, others never moved. This particular one is worn smooth from hands generations of offerings maybe, or comfort. You move on. Al-Uzza is a little more familiar. She's a goddess of beauty protection and sometimes war. She was often associated with lions, big ones, ferocious ones. You turn a corner, and there she is, not in flesh, of course, but in stone. A massive lion carved in relief into the canyon wall. Its face is stylized, almost cartoonish, but the mouth is open as if mid-roar. Water once poured from it. Yes, this lion was also a fountain. A goddess you drink from. That's Petra for you. Just past the lion is a shrine space sunken into the canyon floor. You step down into it. The walls close in tight. At the center is a platform ringed with 3 beetles of different sizes. The largest likely represented Al-Uzza. The smaller 2, perhaps other goddesses, or perhaps her moods, or her enemies. Historians still argue whether Petra's deities were individuals or expressions. One school of thought suggests Al-Uzza wasn't a goddess, but a cosmic balance mechanism, which sounds very sci-fi, but the Nabataeans were nothing if not conceptual. You sit on the edge of the shrine and take in the geometry. Everything here is off-angle. The beetles are not evenly spaced. The corners don't meet at 90 degrees. It's subtle, but deliberate. Perhaps a reminder that divinity can't be boxed. Or maybe just the architect's bad day. But it unsettles you in that soft, intriguing way Petra does so well. As twilight deepens, you begin to notice how much of Petra's god space is hidden, not announced. There are no big statues yelling, "I am Zeus." No murals of epic battles, just shapes and hints. One chamber you pass has a 6-pointed star etched into its ceiling. Another has a serpent winding between crescent moons. Another, still just a blank wall, but with three concentric circles carved so faintly you almost miss them. You wonder how many of Petra's gods were entirely local beings never mentioned in Roman or Greek records. Some may never be known again. One archaeologist found a small sandstone idol shaped like a squid. A squid in a desert city. Was it trade influence? A dream? A symbol for something else entirely? It sits now in a museum labeled Unknown, Deity Possible Maritime Connection. You laugh. Softly. Petra refuses to explain itself. At the edge of the shrine zone, you encounter one final surprise, a long corridor flanked by rectangular tombs, each sealed with a thick slab. The walls between them are filled with carvings of human-animal hybrids, a man with donkey ears, a woman with owl wings, a child holding a fish like a lantern. No inscriptions, no dates. Theories abound. Protective spirits, deified ancestors, bad artists. No one can agree, but they stay with you. You exit the corridor and return to the open air. Above, the stars are arriving, and the cliffs glow faintly red under the last light. Petra is quiet again. And next comes the great lie. The treasury. You've passed it before, admired its grandeur. But you've heard whispers that what people believe about it, the whole treasure of the pharaohs, myth, is completely wrong. In the next section, you'll stand beneath its columns, trace the bullet holes, and uncover why locals still think it watches them. But for now, let Petra's gods drift behind you. Half lion, half shadow, always present. They've seen enough for one night. By now, you've walked with gods shaped like lions, touched sacred cubes that radiate mystery, and peeked into corridors lined with owl-winged women and fish-bearing children. You might be wondering, how does a city filled with such ancient abstract divinities transition to a place where bullet holes scar its most famous building? Because that's what's next. In your journey tonight, you'll stand before Petra's iconic facade, the so-called treasury, and learn that not only is its name a lie, but its entire purpose is still up for debate. And just to keep things spicy, there's a camel heist, some Ottoman soldiers, and a very persistent local myth about a cursed urn. But first, let's set the stage. You return to the Siko, the narrow winding sandstone corridor that most visitors enter through. This time, you approach from within Petra, walking back toward the front, tracing a route few modern tourists take. The moon is full now, and the path glows like it's lit from below. The canyon walls stretch up into darkness, their curves like draped silk frozen into stone. You can already see it before the turn. Al-Khazne, the treasury. You step into the open, and there it stands, a massive, intricately carved facade rising 40 meters into the air. Its columns are perfectly proportioned. The pediment is classical in style, but Nabataean in spirit. There are eagles, urns, acanthus leaves. A pair of statues flanks the entrance, one, a soldier with a spear. The other, a robed figure, perhaps a goddess. Perhaps not. And dead center above the doorway sits the famous urn. From a distance, it's unremarkable, a simple rounded vessel carved into the stone perched atop the central dome like a forgotten offering. But up close, you see it's pockmarked, with bullet holes. Yes, real ones. You stand in front of them, now tracing the edges with your fingertip. The story goes like this for centuries. Bedouin tribes believe the urn held gold, Pharaoh's gold, no less hidden as he fled Moses. Whenever someone had a few spare bullets and an optimistic streak, they'd take a shot. Spoiler alert, it's solid stone. Still, the marks remain frozen, proof of hope, greed, and very bad aim. Even today, guides will tell you not to stand under it too long, just in case. That's probably more for effect than safety, but you still take a step back. So what was the treasury? Really, theories abound. The most popular, it was a royal tomb. The carvings suggest a funerary context, and its scale implies someone important. But others disagree. Some archaeologists think it was a temple, or a memorial, or even a political billboard. A massive permanent look, what we can do. Message from Petra's elite. There's even one fringe theory that suggests it had an acoustic purpose designed to echo voices from within, outward amplifying ritual chants to the whole canyon. This would explain some of the odd interior chamber shapes, not storage, not sleeping quarters, but speakers. You duck inside. The contrast hits you immediately. Outside, ornate, overwhelming. Inside, bare, almost severe. The treasury's inner chambers are square, high-ceilinged, empty. No statues, no furniture. Just shadow stone and the sense that you've walked into a memory. There are 3 rooms here. The central one is largest, with 2 smaller chambers on either side. One theory suggests they represented the underworld, the mortal world, and the divine. Another says they were just family tombs for an exceptionally well-funded client. Another still posits they were never used at all, that the facade was a showpiece, and the inside was always meant to remain empty, symbolizing the unknowable. You linger in the central chamber and notice something odd. The floor slopes slightly. Not a lot, just enough to feel it. Toward the back wall, as if encouraging you to move forward deeper. But there's nowhere to go. Just a blank, undecorated surface. Except, if you run your hand along the right corner, you feel a difference in texture. Smoother. As if polished. Was there once a hidden panel here? A door. Historians still argue whether the treasury holds secret chambers. Ground-penetrating radar has shown some anomalies beneath the structure, but no one's found a way in yet. You exit back into the moonlight. The urn gleams above you, a stone crown. And for a moment, Petra feels like it's watching you, not malevolently, but attentively, waiting. As you walk away, you overhear something. A local guide, probably leading a moonlit tour, tells his group, "They say if you whisper a wish to the urn, it will come true, but only if it's not for gold." You smile. Petra has jokes. And yet, part of you wants to try it, just in case. You whisper something, a hope, a secret. The urn stays silent, but something about the canyon seems lighter. You turn to leave, passing a low stone bench once used by guards. During the Ottoman era, soldiers were stationed here to prevent looting. That didn't always work. There's an old tale of a camel thief who tunneled into the treasury from above, only to find himself trapped overnight with nothing but bats and regret. He emerged the next morning, screaming about a voice that told him, "This is not yours." Was it just fear? Bat hallucinations? A guilty conscience, maybe? Or maybe the treasury still protects what it holds, even if what it holds is nothing. You continue down the path, the sound of your own footsteps loud against the stone. In the next section, you'll see how Petra truly came alive at night. Firelight rituals, veiled dancers, bazaars that didn't close until the second moon rose, but also a shadow of fear. Because for all its beauty, Petra had secrets, even its own people, whispered only after sundown. For now, let the treasury fade behind you, and let the wish stay between you and the urn. You've seen Petra in the light, its symmetry, its brilliance, its carved colonnades that whisper of trade routes and tributes. But now, it's time to see it the way the Nabataeans did under firelight. Because at night, Petra didn't sleep. It changed. By moonrise, the flickering glow of oil lamps would spill from every crevice, musicians would emerge from the shadows, and rituals older than memory would come alive. In this next step of your journey, you'll join a night vigil, one filled with masked dancers, offerings of honeyed wine, and a ritual that may have kept the city safe, or silenced something best left undisturbed. But first listen. The city is quieter than it's ever been. You're standing near the far edge of the main canyon, in a small plaza nestled between two tombs that loom like open eyes. The sun has long since set, and above you, the stars pour over the cliffs like powdered sugar. There are no lights, no torches, just the occasional whisper of wind catching a flagstone and the pulse of your own heartbeat. Then you see it a flicker. Down the canyon, someone lights a small flame, then another, then another. A line of oil lamps appears along the ground, winding through the city like a glowing snake. You follow it. The trail leads you into a low, flat courtyard, partially enclosed by stone columns. The space feels older than the rest of Petra, less polished. There's no carved grandeur here, just raw rock and purpose. A fire burns at its center, fed by wood that must have been hauled from far outside the canyon. Around it, shapes move. They are people, but they wear masks. The masks aren't scary exactly. They're symbolic, crafted from clay and linen painted with ochre and soot. One resembles a falcon, another a lion. One has no mouth. Another is all mouth. They move in silence, circling the fire with deliberate steps. You take a seat along the edge of the circle. No one speaks to you. No one seems surprised by your presence. A low drum begins to play. You can't see the musician, but you feel the rhythm in your chest. Slow, methodical, meant to mimic the beat of a heart or a march. The dancers begin to move in patterns, sharp sudden steps, then soft sways. Their masks catch the firelight in strange ways, distorting shadows. The lion's jaw seems to open. The falcon blinks. Then one dancer stops before the fire and holds out a small object. It's hard to tell what it is from where you sit. A bowl, a piece of fruit. Whatever it is, they place it into the flames. It doesn't burn. Instead, it hisses. A sweet scent fills the air like honey and crushed mint. The air thickens slightly. You feel the shift in the group, not fear exactly. Reverence. Something has begun. This, you suspect, is no ordinary performance. The drumming slows. A chant begins. Low. Almost a hum. The words aren't in any language you recognize. They could be Nabataean. Or older. You watch transfixed as the dancers circle again, this time faster, more fluid. One drops to their knees. Another raises their hands skyward. The flame flickers blue for a moment, and then silence. The chant stops. The drums stop. Even the fire dims. The dancer with the no-mouth mask steps forward and reaches toward the coals, retrieving the object they placed earlier. It's glowing faintly. They carry it carefully, ritually, around the circle, pausing before each masked figure. When they reach you, they stop. They tilt the object toward you just slightly. You can't see inside, but you feel it, an invitation. Not to touch, just to witness. The moment passes. They move on, completing the circuit, then return the object to the flames. This time, it vanishes completely, and the spell breaks. The dancers bow, remove their masks, and begin speaking softly to one another. Laughter bubbles up. The fire flares back to gold. Someone pours a dark liquid into clay cups and passes them around. You're handed one. It smells like date wine. It tastes like dusk. A woman sits beside you. She has soot on her cheeks and gold thread in her sleeves. She smiles, then says in a soft local accent, "We keep the old ways, not because they work, but because they remember." You ask what the ritual meant. She shrugs. Protection, probably. Or promise. Maybe just a story we forgot how to end. She clinks her cup against yours, then vanishes into the night. You sit there a while longer, sipping slowly, watching the fire settle into embers. Around you, the courtyard empties. The drums are packed away. The masks return to bags. And yet, you feel something lingering. Not haunting, but present. Like the scent of a spice you can't name, or a song you've only ever heard in dreams. Petra at night is not a city. It's a memory reenacted. As you leave the courtyard, retracing the oil lamp path, now almost burned out, you wonder how many of these rituals survived Roman conquest. How many were remembered in whispers? How many were lost entirely absorbed into other beliefs, other cities, other names? One Roman historian once wrote that Petra knew how to disappear behind its own shadow. You're beginning to see what he meant. In the next section, you'll watch Petra change again, not into mystery, but into survival. The Roman annexation, the strange blend of imperial architecture and native customs, and a quiet resistance that ran beneath the stone, unrecorded, but very much alive. But tonight you joined the vigil, and Petra remembers you now. You've danced with masked fire bearers and whispered to gods without names. But history isn't just shadow and ritual, it's interruption. Petra, for all its mystery, couldn't stay untouched. Not forever. In this next phase of your journey, you'll walk beside Roman soldiers who marched in with armor, gleaming meat locals who smiled politely while hiding their disgust, and explore what happens when an empire tries to civilize a people who had already mastered their own world. Spoiler alert, the stones remember. Morning has broken over Petra. It's the soft kind of light, pale gold-edged filtering gently between canyon walls. You wake near the edge of the market district, where the firelight still smolders faintly from the ritual the night before. It almost feels like a dream, but the scent of incense still clings to your sleeves. Today, everything feels cleaner, straighter, more Roman. You pass under a newly built arch, well, newly, by Petra standards. It's Roman in design, no question. Clean symmetry, Corinthian columns, and a carved Latin inscription across the top, declaring, "To the divine Emperor Trajan, who brought peace and order." You snort. The Romans didn't conquer Petra with swords. They annexed it with paperwork. It happened quietly in 106 CE. No epic siege. No war cries echoing through the cliffs. One day, Petra was an independent Nabataean kingdom. The next, it was a province of Arabia Petraea. Some call it a smooth transition. Others, especially modern scholars, aren't so sure. There were changes, to be sure, new roads, new coins, new rules, but also new gods. Or rather old ones in Roman drag. You step into a temple courtyard that once honored Dushara. It's still sacred, sort of. The beetles are gone, replaced by a statue of Hercules that looks wildly out of place in the desert sun. His face has that standard Roman smugness, square jaw, curly hair, eyes that don't blink. You're told this was part of syncretism, the Roman strategy of absorbing local deities by assigning them Latin equivalents. So Dushara became Hercules, Al-Uzza. Probably Aphrodite, though not everyone agreed. Historians still argue whether this was spiritual diplomacy or cultural erasure. Either way, Petra changed. The columns around you weren't part of the original Nabataean plan. They were added later, with heavier capitals and wider spacing. Good for imperial ceremonies, not so great for echoing chants or masked dances. The acoustics are off. You clap once, and the sound dies too quickly. Rome didn't just bring buildings, it brought bureaucracy. You pass a stall, where a Nabataean scribe once sat, now replaced by a Roman clerk who insists on Latin forms and exact measurements. If your water usage exceeds the stamped amount the sign says in both scripts, you must appeal to the procurator. Appeal to the procurator. The Nabataeans would have just shared a jug and told a riddle. Still, there were benefits. Trade routes expanded, security improved, and Petra's streets, once winding like vines, were straightened into neat grids. Too neat. You walk those roads now. They're well paved, yes, but lack the organic feel of older paths. It's like someone took Petra's flowing calligraphy and translated it into block print. At the Forum, you see what used to be a local council chamber. Now, it's a Roman-style basilica with marble floors and ported columns, and a statue of Emperor Hadrian that looms over everything like a stern schoolmaster. But listen closely. In the shadows of those arches, locals still whisper in Nabataean. A potter hums a tune older than Rome. A child carves a betel into a hidden niche behind a broken wall. Resistance, it turns out, doesn't always wear armor. Sometimes it wears silence. You enter a bathhouse next. The Romans loved their bathhouses. This one is well-preserved heated floors, carved lion head spouts, frescoes still faintly visible under centuries of dust. The scene on the wall shows a typical Roman banquet men, reclining wine, flowing a lyre player in the corner. But something's off. The lyre player is wearing a Nabataean head wrap. A mistake or a quiet protest by the painter? We'll never know. But Petra leaves clues like that. You just have to squint. At the far end of the bathhouse, you find a private room, a caldarium once filled with hot water. It's dry now, but etched faintly into the wall are symbols you recognize: 3 concentric circles. You saw them before in the Chamber of the Gods. They're back. Someone carved them here after the Romans took over. That, you realize, is the Nabataean rebellion. Not loud, not fiery, but patient. They carved their gods where Rome wouldn't notice, behind frescoes under tiles in the steam. You emerge from the bathhouse into late morning sun. A procession is passing by. At its head, a Roman official in white robes flanked by guards. Behind him, local elders, walking stiffly, wearing the prescribed togas, but looking deeply uncomfortable. They smile, they nod. But their eyes are not here. And now, as you turn the corner, you hear something curious. Laughter. Children are playing near a broken column. One holds a carved betel. Another wears a lion mask made of palm fronds and mud. They're reenacting a ritual, but with giggles instead of chants. One bows dramatically to the betel, then throws a handful of pebbles like a spell. The others cheer. This is how cultures survive. In the next section, you'll trace the fate of Petra as its light begins to dim. Earthquakes, trade collapse, and vanishing rulers. But for now, remember this. Even under empire, Petra kept breathing. Not loudly, just enough to survive. Petra survived Rome bureaucracy and the quiet extinguishing of its rituals, but no city escapes time forever. In this next step of your walk through shadows, you'll witness the slow unraveling of Petra tremors beneath your feet. Whispered betrayals behind carved doors, and the unsettling moment when even the wind seems to forget the city's name. You'll follow the outlines of earthquakes and trade collapse, but you'll also learn that some disappearances happen not with thunder, but with a hush. Your sandals scrape against loose gravel as you walk out of the Roman zone and into an area that feels forgotten, less restored, more collapsed. This is the part of Petra few guides linger in. It's not flashy, no facades, no triumphal arches, just chunks of broken masonry and half-swallowed staircases poking from the sand like ribs. You've entered the zone of decline. It's the late 300s CE. The Roman Empire is wobbling. Trade routes have shifted. The old incense caravans no longer pass through Petra. And then, the ground moves. There were two major earthquakes that historians agree devastated the city, one in 363 CE and another in the early 500s. You're standing on a fault line now. The stones beneath your feet are fractured not by human hands, but by something deeper. Imagine this a temple, mid-service, its columns swaying, merchants scrambling to secure their goods, priests clutching betals as walls split behind them. Then silence, dust, and the slow realization that something vital has cracked not just the city, but the belief in its permanence. Archaeologists have uncovered layers of debris pottery scattered in strange angles, crushed bone-toppled altars still buried beneath fallen roofs. Some structures were never rebuilt. Others were patched hastily, like a wound stitched without care. You pass one now, a once grand house, whose wall has buckled outward, revealing a mosaic floor. It's beautiful. It shows a tree with birds in mid-flight, but two of the birds are missing, lost in the collapse. The metaphor writes itself. Petra tried to recover. Some neighborhoods were rebuilt this time in plainer stone with simpler patterns, but something had changed. The heart had quieted, and then came the slow vanishing. The city didn't fall in one night. It slipped inch by inch behind the world's attention. Trade shifted westward. Rome's influence faded. New cities rose, and Petra's prestige dimmed like an ember that never quite went out. You wander through what was once the administrative quarter. The buildings here are utilitarian record halls, tax stations, supply depots. They're ghostly now. In one, you find a doorframe that still holds a rusted hinge. Nothing else remains. A small inscription on the wall catches your eye. It's Nabataean, but rushed like graffiti. Scholars translated it as no king, no clerk, no light. Was it prophecy? A complaint? A joke hard to say. You sit on the edge of a crumbled stair and listen. Even the wind sounds different here, softer, uncertain. The acoustics that once carried chants and drum beats now just hold echoes. The people left gradually. Some joined rising cities like Jerash or Damascus. Others stayed nearby, living in scattered villages. The Bedouins moved in quiet stewards of stone. They didn't see Petra as ruins. They saw it as shelter memory myth. You come upon a church next, yes. Petra had Christian chapters. In the 500s, CE missionaries converted parts of the city. Some temples were repurposed into churches. There's one here, roofless now, but the mosaic floor remains almost intact. It's exquisite. Waves, vines, peacocks, stars. A different kind of divinity, more gentle. The date palms look like they're still swaying. And in one corner, an inscription in Greek, "The world passes, but the spirit remains." You linger. This wasn't a hostile takeover. Petra changed slowly, gently. The gods with no faces gave way to the god with one, but some symbols lingered. Scholars found crosses carved beside beetle niches cohabiting quietly. The transition wasn't clean, but it was human. And then, nature returned. The sand crept in. The channels clogged. Roofs collapsed. The city turned inward, then downward, vanishing into its own bones. You round a final corner and find a stone path, almost entirely buried. Just a strip remains visible, maybe a meter wide. But on it, you see the faint trace of carved footsteps. Yes, literal footsteps etched into the rock. Some believe they were ceremonial, marking a pilgrimage route. Others think they were a memorial to the city's last ruler. The steps end at a blank wall. You place your foot over the last carved print and look up. Silence. In the next section, you'll witness Petra's rediscovery and the strangers who came not to worship, but to wonder. Explorers, thieves, tourists. You'll watch as the city awakens again, flashlight by flashlight. But tonight, give Petra its stillness. It earned it. You've just traced Petra's slow retreat into silence, abandoned temples, broken mosaics, sand-filled doorways. But stories like Petra's rarely stay buried forever. In this next phase of your journey, you'll step into a moment of rediscovery, a time when curious Europeans appeared with wide eyes and awkward notebooks peeling back the veil of centuries. You'll meet the explorer who had to pretend to be Muslim just to see the treasury, the scholars who misread the inscriptions hilariously, and the local Bedouins who rolled their eyes the whole time. But first, we must meet a queen, one who may never have existed. Your path curves around a low wall, now almost lost to dust. This section of Petra is quiet, but not from decline, more like reverence. Local guides still lower their voices here, not because there's anything obviously sacred, but because of the legend that clings to this slope like mist. You've reached the rumored palace site of Queen Shakilath. The name alone carries weight. Shakilath, consort of King Aratus IV, one of the few women whose name appears in Petra's stonework. Coins were minted and her name statues erected. Some inscriptions even list her as a co-ruler, a rare honor in Nabataean society. And yet, she vanishes. You stand at the base of a rock-cut structure half erased by time. Its stairways lead nowhere. Its walls are blank. No throne room, no burial chamber, no shrine. Just one inscription, barely legible, reading Shakalath of Morning Light. Some say it was a metaphor, that she was never real, but a title. Others argue she was erased, intentionally scrubbed from the record during a later coup or Roman pressure. One theory offered by a French historian in the 1930s claims she faked her death and fled to Egypt to escape assassination. Is any of it true? Maybe, maybe not. But here's what is true. Shakalath appears briefly and brilliantly, then disappears. Like so many parts of Petra, her presence is undeniable, but her story, that's the missing part. You sit on the lowest step, letting the sandstone warm your palms. Wind whistles through what might have been an audience chamber, or a bedroom, or just a rumor-made stone. And then centuries later, enter the foreigners. The 1800s arrive, and with them come maps, monocles, and a truly breathtaking amount of cultural misunderstanding. The first European to truly rediscover Petra in modern times was Johann Ludwig Burckhardt, a Swiss traveler posing as a Muslim scholar named Sheikh Ibrahim ibn Abdallah. You have to respect the dedication. Burckhardt learned Arabic, wore local clothes, and even rehearsed lines for when people got suspicious. In 1812, he finally reached Petra after hearing whispers of a hidden city with tombs taller than palm trees. But he couldn't just stroll in. Local tribes were protective, so he claimed he needed to sacrifice a goat at the tomb of Aaron Moses' brother. It worked. He stepped through the sea and laid eyes on the treasury. His journal entry reads like a mix of awe and absolute panic. An extraordinary facade in the rock, he writes, such as I have never before beheld. Then he realized he couldn't linger, or he'd blow his cover. So he left. It would take decades for others to follow. Scholars, adventurers, looters. Some came to sketch. Others came to steal. One particularly bold Englishman tried to chip off a piece of the treasury's urn, using only a cane and a good deal of optimism. He failed. The urn is still there. You pass the site where some of these early explorers camped just beyond a narrow bend in the rock. Today, it's a flat patch of gravel, but back then, it was called Camp Curiosity. Bedrolls laid out notebooks, flapping, and wide-eyed Europeans scribbling theories like clearly built by lost Egyptians, or evidence of Atlantis. Yes, really. The locals weren't always amused. Many Bedouin tribes had lived near or within Petra for generations. They knew the tombs, the echo spots, even the best way to climb the high place of sacrifice without snapping an ankle. But suddenly their home was crawling with people who pointed at everything and muttered about the Greeks. You find a carved doorway near the western ridge, with a faint line of modern graffiti initials dated 1894. Beneath it, written in Arabic, someone scratched, "We were here before them." Still, there were moments of cooperation. Some Bedouin families guided travelers in exchange for coin. Others kept the secrets of Petra quiet, passing them down like heirlooms. One tale tells of a young shepherd who led a scholar to an undiscovered tomb only to forget the route on purpose the next day. You smile. Petra wasn't so easily given away. You continue deeper into the city, where reconstruction efforts have left traces, metal rods reinforcing facades, interpretive signs in 5 languages. You pass a tourist bin filled with replica coins. The city has re-entered the world. But something's different now. It's not just a ruin. It's a museum, a monument, a destination. In 1985, Petra was declared a UNESCO World Heritage Site. In 2007, it was named one of the new 7 wonders of the world. Visitors now number in the millions each year. Instagram has replaced sketchbooks. But if you step away from the main trails, it's still there. You duck into a side canyon where no one walks and find a simple betel, weathered moss-covered forgotten. No signs. No crowds. Just stone and silence. Petra doesn't mind being seen, but it never quite gives everything. In the next section, you'll learn the oddest story of all, a local legend about a goat, a locked tomb, and the one night it all nearly came undone. But tonight, you sit with Shakaloth, and the wind still calls her name. You've now traced Petra's arc from a sacred red city to a rediscovered marvel, from silent gods to sneaky scholars. But legends don't always wear crowns or carry scrolls. In this next part of your journey, you'll meet an unlikely protagonist, a goat. Yes, a goat. In a tale passed down through campfires and coffee ceremonies, this humble animal becomes the key to one of Petra's strangest and possibly truest ghost stories. But before you chuckle, just remember, many of Petra's secrets were unlocked by accident. It begins in the dry season. You're following a winding path along the far western ridge of Petra, an area mostly untouched by restoration efforts. The cliffs here are rougher pocked with small caves and shrines that look more like mistakes than monuments. The air smells of dust and distant herbs. You pass a few goat droppings, sun-dried and ancient-looking, possibly from this century. Possibly from the tale you're about to hear. The story goes like this. A young shepherd, some say, from the Bedouin tribe, others say, from beyond the hills, was searching for a lost goat. The animal had wandered from the main herd just before dusk. The boy, no more than 12, followed its hoofprints through a side canyon he'd never dared to explore. You're walking it now. The walls rise steeply on both sides, casting the path into early twilight. You see why this place isn't on the maps. It's narrow, unremarkable, but at the far end, there's a fissure, barely wide enough for a child, or a goat. According to the story, the boy squeezed through. The goat had gone in, so must he. What he found on the other side defies easy retelling. You duck through the same fissure, emerging into a small, oval-shaped chamber, hidden behind natural rock. No ornate carvings, no columns. But what catches your eye is the doorway, half sealed. A rectangular arch, cut into the wall, framed by soft curves of sandstone, worn by time but still intact. The stone slab that once covered the entrance lies to one side cracked, but not shattered. No modern markings, no signage, just here, the tomb. Legend says the boy found his goat lying calmly beside the open tomb. It had curled up against the stone, chewing something possibly cloth, possibly more sacred than any of us cared to admit. But it wasn't the goat that startled the boy. It was the sound. From within the tomb, he heard breathing. Soft, rhythmic, human. He didn't run, not yet. He crept closer, the way only children and fools do. Inside, he saw a chamber larger than it should be. 4 carved figures stood against the wall, human-like, robed, but lacking faces, just smooth ovals where identity should have been. Then the breathing stopped. That's when he ran. Sprinted out goat in tow, all the way back to the main trail, where his uncle waited with a shepherd's crook and a particularly angry frown. He tried to explain. The tomb, the figures, the breathing, the cloth. No one believed him, except his grandmother. She said, that's not the first time that tombs opened, but it should be the last. The next morning the fissure had narrowed, the slab had moved, and the goat refused to go near that canyon again. Now standing here centuries later, you peer into the tomb. No breathing, but the air is cooler than the surrounding rock. You shine your torch inside. The chamber is shallow, maybe 3 meters across. But in the far corner, half hidden by rubble, you see it. A stone figure, humanoid, smooth-faced, arms crossed, weathered, but unmistakable. Was this part of an unknown burial tradition? Or something older perhaps, pre-Nabataean? Historians still argue whether some tombs in Petra predate the city itself, built by a civilization whose name never made it into the scrolls. You back out slowly, careful not to disturb the dust. Goat or not, this place remembers. You return to the trail. The sun is lower now. Shadows stretch long, reaching across the canyon like fingers. There are other versions of the tale. Some say the boy never came out at all, that the goat returned alone, eyes white, trailing a scrap of linen with ancient writing. Others claim the tomb was later discovered by archaeologists who found nothing inside, except a child's sandal. But the most persistent version, it says the tomb opens once every generation, not for explorers, not for kings, just for the lost and the foolish. You walk slowly now, taking in the landscape with new caution. Petra may be mapped, photographed, even monetized, but it still keeps places like this. Corners unscripted, stories unverified, and maybe that's the point. In the next section, you'll leave behind the old tombs and rejoin the living, specifically the Bedouins whose lives were reshaped when Petra went from memory to UNESCO badge. You'll see how modernity drew a dotted line through tradition, and what remains of the old way tucked behind souvenir stalls and guided hikes. But tonight, spare a thought for the goat, the original explorer, So far, Petra has shown you temples carved by gods, secrets whispered by masked dancers, and even a breathless tomb cracked open by a goat. But now it's time to return to the surface, sort of. In the next stretch of your journey, you'll step into the modern shadow of Petra, where history meets real estate, where Bedouin children grow up beneath satellite dishes, but still know which cave echoes best at sunset. You'll witness what happens when UNESCO signs are nailed into ancestral homes, and tourism wears a smile that doesn't always reach the eyes. Petra's story isn't over, but it's complicated. Your steps take you east past the great tombs and the faded Roman columns toward an area that doesn't appear in guidebooks. Sayhun. It looks like any small desert village. Low homes, iron gates, solar panels, catching the morning sun. But beneath the satellite dishes and parked scooters lie older foundations, literal and emotional. This is where many of Petra's native families now live, relocated in the 1980s, when the Jordanian government, in partnership with UNESCO, decided that living inside a World Heritage Site was not ideal. At the time, hundreds of people, mostly from the Bidul Bedouin tribe, were living inside Petra itself, in tombs, in caves, in spaces that had no locks but plenty of memory. They were moved, promised electricity, plumbing, schools, and they got those things, sort of. But what they lost, that's harder to quantify. You pass an open doorway where a man sits weaving a goat hair rug. His radio plays low music, half folk, half pop. He nods as you walk by. Beside him, a boy draws something in the dust with a stick. You glance closer. It's not a smiley face. It's a betel. Old symbols don't die. They just move. You sit with an elder under a fig tree. He's got tea ready before you even ask. Sweet dark, and so hot you nearly drop the cup. He doesn't ask where you're from. Doesn't care. But when you mention Petra, his eyes narrow, not in anger, but in calculation. Used to sleep inside the treasury when I was a boy, he says. Summer, we'd stay near the back, away from the moonlight. Cooler there. You ask if he misses it. He shrugs. We still go. But now we need permission. Or we dress like guides. He grins, but the humor doesn't quite land. He tells you stories about growing up among the tombs, learning how to track goats by shadow, which caves echo best during thunderstorms. About weddings that took place under beetles, and how his grandfather once convinced a tourist that the treasury was built by aliens for a fee. Then his tone shifts. He speaks of fences, of rangers with checklists, of tourists who take photos of the Bedouins like they're part of the exhibit. Smile, he mimics holding up an imaginary camera. Show me your camel. Now go. There's no bitterness in his voice, just a quiet weariness. You walk through the village after past murals painted by local children, camels, caravans, red cliffs, but also cell towers and buses. Their world is a mosaic like everything in Petra. And then you see it. A home built partially into a cliff face. Its back wall is pure Petra stone, natural uncut. The front cement and rebar. It's a metaphor you didn't ask for, but here it is, past and present awkwardly welded together. You peek inside. A television hums. A hookah pipe rests on a rug patterned with geometric swirls. Above it, a shelf of trinkets, plastic toys, glass beads, and one ancient Nabataean coin glued to a piece of wood. Heritage curated. You meet a teenager later who shows you Petra on his phone, not the ruins, but drone footage he stitched together from his own flights. No one films the goat trails, he says proudly. Only me. He tells you how he and his friends race up the rocks near the monastery At dawn, beat the tourists to the top, then leave before the ticket checkers arrive. Petra's still ours. He says, not defiant, just stating a fact. But it isn't simple. Some families have benefited from tourism. Others have struggled. The relocation promised balance. Instead, it offered compromise. Some adapted, some resisted, and some drifted. You learn of one family who still lives part-time inside a cave despite regulations. They've blocked the entrance with blankets and barrels. You won't find them on maps. But they host poetry nights, songs about sand and lost gods, songs that mention Dushara by name. You ask if the government knows. The answer? A smile. Everything in Petra now is about what's seen and what isn't. As you return to the main trail, you pass a souvenir stall. Rows of ceramic camels, miniature treasury replicas, keychains that say, Petra forever. The vendor waves. Want a real rock from Petra? He asks, grinning. You raise an eyebrow. He leans in. Don't worry, I only sell the fakes. You buy one anyway. And as you slip it into your pocket, you hear the quiet hum of a nearby generator. Petra running on diesel and memory. In the next section, you'll move beyond the tourist paths, out toward the edges of the site, where strange mounds and partially buried shapes suggest that Petra's greatest secrets may still sleep beneath the dust. But tonight, remember this Petra lives, not just in stone, but in laughter protest and a teenager's drone. You've seen Petra through its ceremonies, its scars, and its satellite dishes. But what if most of it truly still lies unseen? In this next and final stretch of your journey, you'll leave behind the facades and souvenir stalls to explore Petra's edge, a place of forgotten tombs, half-swallowed staircases, and puzzling mounds. Archaeologists still haven't explained. This is the Petra that doesn't appear in brochures, the one that still sleeps beneath the dust, humming quietly, waiting for someone to ask the right question. Your feet crunch over loose gravel as you walk past the official end of the map. Literally. There's a wooden sign near a line of stones. Tourists beyond this point must be accompanied by a licensed guide. It's sun-faded. Half its screws are missing. No one's enforcing it today, so you keep walking. The terrain flattens, then dips. It's quieter out here. No tour groups, no shouts. Just wind over stone and the occasional call of a distant bird, shrill and echoing like it's warning something. To your right, a faint trail splits off. No signage, just footprints. You follow it. And there, rising out of the ground, like the curve of a buried shoulder, is one of Petra's strangest structures, the so-called unfinished tomb. It looks like someone started carving a monument, then stopped halfway. A doorway has been shaped, but never hollowed. Columns began to emerge, but were left uneven. The ledge above was flattened, then abandoned. Why, no one agrees. Some think it was a test site, a place where apprentices practice carving before graduating to real facades. Others claim it belonged to a king who died before construction was complete, and the project was considered cursed. A third theory, unpublished, whispered among local archaeologists, suggests it wasn't unfinished at all, that it was deliberately made to look abandoned. A decoy, a misdirection. From what you keep walking, the terrain becomes more uneven. The rocks shift subtly, like they've been rearranged by time or something deeper. Ahead, you find a series of low mounds, dozens of them barely perceptible unless you're looking. From a distance, they could be dunes. Up close, they reveal the faint outlines of carved stone beneath. Buried walls, thresholds, steps. This area, archaeologists say, is only 3% excavated. 3%. That means the vast majority of Petra isn't what we've seen, but what we haven't. The real city, the one locals and priests and queens lived in, might still be hiding beneath your feet. You crouch beside one of the mounds. The dirt is loose but firm. The shape of something stone peeks from beneath. You brush it gently. A line, then another, possibly part of a lintel or frame. You don't dig. You're not allowed. But you mark the spot in your mind. Nearby, an old cistern lies exposed. Its mouth is dry now, but deep. Deeper than expected. A single fig tree grows beside it, out of place defiant. You sit in its shade, and then you see it. Across the valley, just at the edge of a slope, something glints. Not bright, just a shimmer. You walk toward it. It's a shard of glass, modern probably. But beside it, partially buried in dust, is a piece of painted pottery. Simple. Red swirl on pale clay. Not decorative. Functional. Someone once drank from this. Not a king, not a priest. Someone. Maybe a mother. Maybe a guard. Maybe a child who preferred this end of the city, the part no one talks about. You pocket the glass, leave the shard. The land here tells a different story. It isn't about facades. It's about function. Homes, gardens, workshops. This might have been the Petra of the people less photographed, more lived in, and still so unknown. You climb one last rise before the cliffs fall into the valley beyond. From here you see the whole city stretch behind you. The treasury, just a sliver of rose gold in the distance. The colonnaded street, now just shadows. The high place of sacrifice, where your calves still remember the climb. You exhale, then you look down. At your feet is a pile of smooth stones. They don't belong here. Too even, too deliberate. Someone stacked them recently or long ago. On top is a small wooden carving, a camel faded with a single word scratched into its belly in Nabataean script. Remember, you sit beside it. What is Petra? Not just a ruin, not just a relic. Petra is an ongoing sentence, a paragraph with its verbs missing, a history book where half the chapters were erased by wind and time and rain. And you've just read one footnote. In the final section, you'll return from the outer edge and let the story slow. You'll drift gently into Petra's final breaths, the ones that murmur as you sleep. No gods, no drama, just the whisper of stone remembering. But first, close your eyes. You've earned this pause. You've wandered to Petra's edge, felt its breath beneath dust, and glimpsed its forgotten limbs. Tombs half dug, steps to nowhere, shards of life never catalogued. But your journey isn't quite finished. In the final full chapter, you'll return to the heart of the city, not to see it again, but to see it differently. You'll walk Petra's arteries with the knowledge of its secret bones, view its columns with the eyes of those who had to let them go, and ask the question, what in the end does Petra still keep for itself? You rise from the stone pile with the carved camel still watching you silently, the word remember scratched across its belly like a final instruction. The cliffs behind you are sunlit but softer now, late afternoon, giving everything a golden fatigue. Your feet take you back, not quite retracing your steps, but curving inward toward the city's heart. And this time, every familiar structure feels like a whisper rather than a monument. There's the treasury, once the dazzling opening act. Now it feels quieter. You notice things you didn't before: the asymmetry of its upper columns, the faded chisel marks near its base, the fine dust accumulating in its cracks like accumulated sighs. You wonder how many people stand here every year without seeing it. Not really. You walk on, passing a guide, explaining loudly that the urn was once believed to hold Pharaoh's gold. You resist the urge to correct him. Just past the crowd, you spot a narrow alley between two tombs. It's not on most maps, but someone has swept the path. You follow it. It leads to a small chamber, roofless, open to the sky. At its center is a stone platform waist high. On top rests a square slab of sandstone. No carvings, no inscriptions. But burned into the surface, long cooled, are the traces of a fire. This is a place of memory. Some say Petra's Bedouins return here each year during the off-season. No cameras, no tourists. Just family. They light a small fire. They pass stories. Not of kings, but of cousins. Not of temples, but of lost sandals and hidden springs. You sit beside the platform, fingers trailing across the cooled ash. How do you remember a city that remembers you back? Petra has always resisted being fully known. Every time a new excavation is proposed, something goes wrong. The permits get tangled. The terrain shifts. Equipment fails. Some blame bureaucracy. Others blame the stones. Petra reveals itself slowly, a local archaeologist once told you, but only to those who listen. You think of that as you pass the great Roman theater again. It's empty now, the seats warm from the sun. You sit near the top row, looking out, not at the stage, but at the city beyond. What is performance here, and what is ritual? Some scholars believe that by the time Rome claimed Petra, the performances on this stage had changed entirely. No longer Greek comedies or Roman tragedies, but local plays. Oral stories made dramatic. One inscription found backstage simply reads, "She wore the lion mask," and the audience wept. No one knows the rest of the play, but you can imagine it. As you continue toward the colonnaded street, a breeze stirs the sand. It's the kind of breeze that carries voices, if you let it. Children laughing, a goat protesting, a merchant arguing over the price of dyed wool. You can almost hear it all. You pause at the Petra church, roofless, elegant its mosaic floor, still catching the light. A lone column stands intact, defiant. One tile near the edge bears an image of a palm tree split down the center. Some interpret it as division. Others, rebirth. You keep walking. Near the old market, a small shop is still open. The vendor offers you tea. You accept. You sit. He says nothing for a while, just pours. Then first time in Petra. You nod, though technically untrue. He looks at your shoes. You went far. You nod again. He smiles but doesn't pry. He pours another cup. Before you leave, he hands you a tiny object wrapped in cloth. Gift, he says. It's a pebble. Smooth. Ordinary. But on one side, someone has drawn a tiny doorway in ink. Sometimes we carry the entrance with us, he adds, and goes back to his tea. You step back onto the main trail. It's quieter now. Sunset is coming. Petra glows like it's lit from inside. The cliffs, the tombs, even the sand seem to breathe. In the next and final section, you'll slow even further. You'll let the rhythm of this place cradle you, guide you gently towards sleep, and carry with you not facts or timelines, but presence. But for now, walk slower. Let your footsteps be the punctuation in Petra's unfinished sentence. You've wandered Petra's rise, its rituals, and its ruins. You've met a goat, a ghost, and a girl named Shakalath. But now, the journey bends toward its ending. In this last full section, you won't uncover anything new. Not because there's nothing left, but because Petra doesn't give everything away in one lifetime. Instead, you'll drift through the final corners of the city with soft eyes, retracing not the monuments, but the silences between them. And just beyond the stone, a stillness where history becomes hush. The sun is dipping behind the cliffs as you make your way to Petra's far southern ridge. The air is cooler, the sky a watercolor wash of soft orange and faint lavender. Everything feels slower now, as if the city knows it's time to let go. You step carefully over flat rock and fine dust, where the wind leaves curled trails like calligraphy no one has yet translated. To your right, a staircase worn nearly flat by centuries of passing feet. It leads upward to nothing. The end is lost to collapse, but it draws you anyway. You climb. Halfway up, you stop to catch your breath. And from this height, you can see the full body of Petra stretched out below its chest, rising and falling with heat shadow wind. The treasury catches the last of the light. The tombs darken into long, watchful blinks. A dog barks in the far village, then stops as if remembering its place in this quiet. You continue to the top, where the stairs end, at a platform with no railing and no explanation, just a flat square of stone, and the feeling that someone once stood here for a very particular reason. You sit down. No guides, no signs, no stories. Just the sound of the breeze tugging at the past. You let your thoughts wander. You think about how much Petra still hides, about the lost inscriptions, the sealed chambers, the meaning behind those faceless gods, about the woman who wrote her name into the rock then vanished without a trace, about the child with the betel in his sketchbook, the shepherd who followed a goat into a tomb. Petra is full of half-told stories, not because no one finished them, but because they were never meant to end. That's what you realize here at the edge. Some cities are chapters. Petra is a comma. You rise as the last light fades. The path back is dim but familiar now. The wind picks up again, sifting sand into soft ribbons. You pass the market quiet, the theater still. A single oil lamp flickers outside a rest stop. You nod to the keeper. He nods back. Past the colonnaded street, you pause by the great urn atop the treasury. It glows faintly in the moonlight, less like stone, more like memory. You think again of the bullet holes, of the wishes, of the silence that always answers back. You walk past the sikh, but don't exit. Not yet. Instead, you follow a side path, known only to locals. It wraps back around the cliffs, past a fig tree, past a well, no longer listed on maps. You sit by the well, as others once did, and listen. There's nothing dramatic now. No discoveries. No breathing tombs. Just this, the creak of stone cooling the rustle of air across old gods, the faint splash of time slipping into stillness. In a moment, the narration will slow. You'll be carried toward sleep. But before that, you look up. The stars above Petra are wider than you remember, wilder. They feel like punctuation too. You close your eyes, and the city remains not as place, but as presence. Petra doesn't ask to be understood, only remembered. You're standing at the narrow mouth of Petra's Seek, the long, twisting gorge that serves as the grand entrance to the ancient Nabataean city. The walls rise, sharply closing in with reddish-pink hues that seem to glow even in twilight. The air is dry still and warm against your cheeks, and the silence absolute until it isn't. You take your first careful steps along the cobbled path, sneakers crunching softly underfoot. The moment you move, something odd happens, the faint sound of footsteps behind you. Not echoes. Footsteps. They match your pace, lagging slightly, as though someone is following, just a beat too slow. You pause. They pause. You go. They go. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop your country and the local time in the comments. Now dim, the lights maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The Six eerie soundscape has puzzled tourists and researchers alike for decades. Meandering nearly a mile between towering rock walls, the Syke naturally funnels wind sound and shadow. But the phenomenon of the following footsteps isn't entirely explainable by standard acoustics. Even seasoned hikers report it. The footsteps are distinct, light, deliberate trailing. One hiker swore he turned around at least 4 times, thinking his wife was catching up, but she was 2 minutes behind him. Some blame it on shifting temperatures and narrow echoes. Others say it's the interplay of irregular stone surfaces bouncing sound unpredictably. And then there are those who point to something stranger. Petra, after all, was not just a city, it was a ceremonial passage, a living temple. Some believe the Syke was designed for transformation. You didn't just walk into Petra. You were meant to be observed, and maybe gently followed. Historians still argue whether the Nabataeans intentionally sculpted the CQ's curves to enhance sensory effects. Archaeological evidence suggests that carvings and channels along the walls weren't just decorative or functional, they may have been symbolic too. Water channels lined the path, possibly sacred. Altars were carved discreetly into nooks along the walls, like spiritual speed bumps for the soul. And yet no definitive Nabataean text explains this. That's part of the maddening charm of Petra. The civilization left us stunning monuments, ingenious hydrological systems, and tombs carved into cliffs, but very few written records. What they wanted us to remember is carved in stone. What they didn't lost entirely. So when you pause mid-sick and hear that quiet shuffle behind you again, the question isn't just what caused it, it's who was meant to hear it. You keep walking. Maybe you hum a little, just to drown out the companion you can't quite catch. The air grows cooler as the gorge narrows. You look up, and there's barely a sliver of sky above, framed by rippling sandstone layers like frozen waves. You think of time stacked in colors, millennia compacted into curling strata, each layer. Once sand, then sea, then silence. And always those steps. Never rushing, never overtaking. Just there. One theory whispered by local guides, but scoffed at in faculty lounges, is that the footsteps belong to Petra's invisible guards. Nabataean ritual didn't distinguish sharply between this world and the next. Spirits of place ancestor guides, or even deified architects, could have been invoked to watch over pilgrims. The CQ as the opening act of Petra would have been sacred ground, some say even a test. You pass niches that once held statues. Most are weather-worn, now their occupants long vanished. But in your peripheral vision for a second, you could swear there's a figure. Just a flicker. Could be shadow. Could be imagination. Could be memory pressing itself into your brain like a thumb into clay. The more you walk, the more your senses tangle. The way your footfall feels delayed, like your body moves slightly ahead of your perception. The way the sound of trickling water lingers, although the channels have been dry for centuries. The way the sandstone smells faintly metallic, almost like blood, almost like nothing. And then just as your nerves begin to itch, the path bends gently and opens. There, dramatically revealed in soft moonlight, is Al-Khazne, the treasury. The silence now feels different, not empty, but charged, as if the very walls were holding their breath. But the footsteps, gone. They never quite reach the end. You wouldn't expect to find a staircase in the middle of a cliff with no doorway, no platform, no shrine. But in Petra, logic doesn't always get a say. As you leave the Seek and move deeper into the city, your eyes adjust to the shifting terrain. Towering facades greet you, some regal, some ominous, each one hollowed directly into rose-red rock. You're surrounded by architecture that wasn't built. It was revealed. And just as your mind starts to accept that Petra's grandeur follows a certain rhythm, something breaks the pattern. Perched about 20 feet up a sheer cliff wall, there's a staircase. A proper one wide, steps carefully carved, angled as if inviting an ascent. But it leads nowhere. No ledge above, no door, no carvings to suggest it was ever part of something larger. Just stone steps rising up and ending in solid rock. Your first instinct is to think erosion. Maybe the upper structure collapsed. But the clean finish of the last step is suspiciously intact, like the mason simply stopped and packed up early one afternoon. The desert isn't known for rain or earthquakes, so what would explain this precise dead-end? Historians still argue whether the staircase is unfinished ceremonial or just symbolic. And here's where Petra gets cheeky again. This isn't the only staircase to nowhere in the area. Scattered around the cliffs are similar formations, some short, some narrow, some incredibly steep, all ending in what appears to be intentional futility. You shift your weight and imagine climbing it. The stone under your hand would be warm, slightly gritty. Your legs would strain by the third step, no handrails, of course. At the top, you'd reach out and find yourself staring into solid rock high above the canyon floor. So why carve such a thing? One theory is that these stairs were meant for the dead, not the living. The Nabataeans practiced complex burial rituals. Perhaps ascending a staircase toward nothingness represented the soul's journey into the beyond, a climb that ends in stone, not sky, because the destination wasn't physical. Another guess. These were performance platforms. Priests or oracles might have stood atop the steps during ceremonies, their bodies silhouetted against the sky as they recited prayers or read omens. Standing above the crowd, closer to the gods. Their voices, amplified by the curved canyon walls, might have seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once. Then again, maybe they were viewing stations. Imagine a time when Petra wasn't a hushed ruin, but a bustling, sun-drenched city. What if someone stood atop those steps, not to reach something, but to be seen? A merchant, an official, a priestess, an ancient soapbox carved into the land. And yet the simplest possibility can't be ignored. What if someone started to build a grander structure, a temple, a tomb, a house, and abandoned it halfway? Budget issues aren't just a modern problem. Sorry, boss. We ran out of goats to trade for chisels. Still, that clean finish nags at you. This wasn't sloppy work. Nabataean stonemasonry was precise, almost obsessive. Their engineers calculated angles, water pressure, solar paths. A staircase that stops sharply isn't a failure, it's a message. You walk a little farther and notice something else. The staircase casts a shadow that at certain times of day forms a perfect right angle against the cliff. And once a year, during the equinox, the shadow aligns with a carved symbol several feet away, a triangle with an eye-like mark inside. Coincidence? Astronomers don't think so. Historians still debate whether Petra functioned partly as an open-sky observatory. Many of its structures are aligned with solstices and planetary risings. So maybe the staircase was part of a celestial map, a visual marker, a calendar cue carved in stone. The steps weren't for your feet, they were for your eyes. One fringe theory even posits that these staircases were sound ladders. No, not actual musical instruments, but devices to manipulate sound in ceremonies. Certain frequencies echo differently depending on surface angles. Chant from atop the stair, and your voice might travel farther, echo longer. A built-in amplifier made of silence and stone. As you step back, the absurdity of it is almost comforting. A staircase that leads nowhere, yet draws so much speculation. It's a monument to mystery, to choices made by people we'll never fully understand, to the fact that even in the world's most logical cities, someone once said, "Let's put some steps here," and nobody stopped them. You glance one more time, and for a moment, just a moment, you picture a barefoot figure, standing on the top step arms, raised face toward the sun, saying something ancient. Or maybe nothing at all. Then they vanish. You've already faced phantom footsteps and a staircase to nowhere. But Petra isn't finished with you, not even close, because just ahead, scratched into the canyon's quiet walls, is a language no one can read. As you round a bend near what scholars believe was once a busy market path, something catches your eye, low on the wall, maybe 2 feet off the ground, a cluster of fine lines etched into the stone. Not graffiti, not doodles. These are precise, intentional, and maddeningly cryptic. It's not Nabataean Aramaic. It's not Greek. It's not Latin, or any variation of ancient Semitic script that scholars know. You crouch down and look closer. Each symbol is maybe the length of a pinky nail carved so faintly they almost vanish in direct light. But they're there, a spiraled shape, like a snail shell, a triangle with 2 dots inside a mark, like a crooked ladder. The lost language of the Nabataeans has haunted archaeologists for decades. Dozens of such inscriptions have been found across Petra, some on cliff walls, some beneath architectural elements, a few tucked away in areas that were clearly sacred, but none of them match any documented alphabet. And they don't repeat often enough to guess meaning through pattern. Historians still argue whether these are even words. Some say it's proto-writing, a system of visual codes used by a spiritual or priestly class meant not to be read, but to be felt. Others think the symbols were mnemonic devices, prompts for storytelling, chanting, or trance rituals. You weren't meant to read them the way you're reading this text. You were meant to remember what they awakened in your mind. The most haunting suggestion, these symbols were meant only for the dead. You trace one with your finger, careful not to press too hard. A swirl, a loop, a pair of intersecting lines. The groove is shallow, worn, but unmistakably deliberate. It's as if someone wanted to speak, but didn't want the living to hear. A whisper, etched in limestone. One particularly eerie carving is located near a chamber, believed to be an ancestral tomb. The symbol there, 3 parallel lines, topped by a crescent, appears only once in Petra. Just once. Some linguists speculate it was a name. Others think it was a warning. A Nabataean legend preserved only in fragmentary oral accounts speaks of the words carved for silence. Phrases that once said aloud would become meaningless. To preserve power, they had to remain unspoken. So they were buried in stone, safe from breath. You shift your gaze to a different section of wall. A few yards away, more markings, but this time interspersed with regular Nabataean text. That's rare, and it suggests one tantalizing possibility. These symbols might not be separate from Nabataean writing, but an embedded code within it. Imagine you're a Nabataean priest or healer. You carve a message in public text, a dedication, a list, a prayer, but hidden inside it, a secret. Only those who know the symbolic layer can extract the true meaning. A cipher culture, history encrypted. And if that doesn't send a tingle down your spine, how about this? In 2016, infrared imaging of certain Petra walls revealed faint burn marks near these symbols. Not fire damage, but controlled scorching, likely from oil lamps or torches held steadily in place. Which suggests people weren't just reading these symbols, they were illuminating them, ritualistically, maybe even waiting for them to answer. You rise slowly and dust your hands. A gust of wind stirs the fine grit around your shoes. Somewhere in the distance, a bird calls harsh and high, and for a moment the sound bounces oddly, like it's caught in the curve of the rock. You can't help but wonder how many other languages, whole systems of thought, have been carved into this world, and lost Petra, for all its grandeur, offers more silence than clarity. The treasury dazzles, the monastery looms, but it's the scribbled corners, the marginalia of stone, that hold its deepest enigmas. And here's a final twist. Before we move on, in 2023, a linguist visiting from Morocco suggested that some of the symbols matched Amazigh rock art from North Africa, thousands of miles away. Could the Nabataeans have traded not just spices and silk, but script? Could Petra's unknown language be a thread in a much older tapestry? No one knows. You step back, letting your eyes blur slightly to take in the entire surface. Lines become patterns. Patterns hint at intention, but the message still locked, still waiting. And just ahead, as we continue, things get stranger. Because next, you'll come to a spot where echoes don't behave the way they should, where the rocks might actually answer back. If Petra's unknown language left you unsettled, brace yourself. Because what comes next isn't just silence, it's conversation. The rocks, they say, don't just echo here. They reply. The path twists once again, drawing you away from the symbol-scarred walls and toward a narrow cove tucked into the cliff's embrace. This spot isn't on most tourist maps. There are no signs, no explanatory plaques, just a hollowed alcove where the light never quite feels natural. And locals whisper about the place that talks back. At first glance, it's nothing special. A shallow shaded recess in the stone, big enough for maybe 3 people to stand comfortably. You step inside. The temperature drops. Your breath feels louder in your ears. Then you speak. Hello. And something answers. Not an echo. Not your own voice. Something different. Shorter. Muted. A syllable you didn't say pitched strangely, like it's been filtered through dust and time. This phenomenon, known among archaeologists and local guides alike as the echo that speaks back, has stumped acoustic engineers for decades. Unlike a normal echo, which simply returns your sound with a delay, Petra's whispering alcove modifies it, shapes it. One researcher described it as auditory mimicry with attitude. Historians still argue whether the effect is intentional or coincidental. Petra's architecture, after all, demonstrates a masterful understanding of light, water, and space. Could they also have mastered sound? Some believe this niche was a ritual chamber, a place where Nabataean priests or pilgrims could speak into the stone and receive what felt like an answer, a psychological trick maybe, but a powerful one. After all, humans don't need much to believe a rock is listening. Just a voice that returns. Changed. You test it again. My name is... And this time, the returning sound clips off the final syllable, as if whoever's listening isn't patient or doesn't care. That's when it happens. A sound not from your voice at all. A low, vowel-heavy murmur, like someone just outside the alcove muttering under their breath. You turn sharply. No one. Just the same crimson stone and the same sliver of sky. Could it be wind a bird, A trick of your own breathing, maybe. But let's indulge the other explanation, that the Nabataeans, masters of trade and mystique, designed this hollow to mimic a presence, that you were supposed to enter alone, speak your fears or questions, and be answered in kind. That the stone became your ritual partner, your confessor, your mirror. One theory links the alcove to a rite of passage. Pilgrims on the way to the high place of sacrifice may have stopped here, spoke their names, and waited for Petra to speak them back or not. Acceptance by echo, or rejection by silence. You speak again. What are you? This time the echo breaks into two pieces. Your own voice, fractured, staggered. It sounds like someone interrupting you. You laugh nervously, and the laugh comes back wrong. Shorter, sharper. You step out of the alcove quickly. Once you do, the air feels lighter, normal. The sound behaves as it should. You clap your hands, one crisp echo two. Nothing strange, but that little chamber lingers in your mind. Some believe the speaking echo was amplified by clay or metal that lined parts of the walls long since eroded or stolen. Others think it was an early experiment in binaural sound voices directed by angle and structure to disorient or persuade. A sacred audio illusion. Still others point to mythology. Across many ancient cultures, caves and hollows were believed to house spirits, oracles, even gods. You didn't go into a place like that to speak. You went to listen. Petra, with its blend of Hellenistic Arabian and Mesopotamian traditions, may have created a hybrid ritual, something borrowed, something stolen, something entirely their own. And just when you think you've heard the last of the whispers, a soft breeze moves through the rocks behind you. It sounds like breathing. You walk on. What's coming next? Well, if you think Petra's mysteries have all been spiritual or auditory, so far brace yourself. Because just ahead is a structure so bizarre, it confounds historians for a totally different reason. It's a temple with no god. So far, Petra has given you whispers, shadows, symbols, and echoes that don't obey the rules. But coming up next is a place that's visually striking and spiritually blank. It looks like a temple, acts like a temple, but where's the god? As you continue through Petra's dusty arteries, the path levels out into a quiet expanse of flat stone framed by low squared columns. It feels ceremonial. You can sense it in the way your body moves. You instinctively slow down, straighten up, breathe quieter. The space has gravity. At the far end stands the structure. It isn't flashy like the treasury. No Corinthian flourishes. No sculpted guardians or dramatic facade. But its shape is unmistakable broad stairs leading to a columned portico, and behind that, a large chamber carved into the cliff. It looks like the kind of place where something divine once happened, and that's exactly the problem. Inside, there are no altars, no carvings, no votive niches, no statues. The walls are blank, smooth, almost unsettling. This is what scholars call the temple with no god. At first, many assumed the space had simply been looted, its sacred objects stolen. But a closer look at the walls reveals something strange. There's no evidence that anything was ever affixed there. No mounting holes, no wear patterns. Just clean stone carved with precision and then left bare. Historians still argue whether the chamber was meant to be a temple at all. Its symmetry, orientation, and acoustics suggest ritual use. It even faces the rising sun classic temple alignment, but without any iconography, who or what was worshipped here. One theory is that this was a godless sanctuary, a site of reflection, not devotion. The Nabataeans might have believed in divine forces beyond representation. a place where silence was the offering and the visitor was the altar. That would explain the blankness. The absence of symbol becomes its own kind of sacred symbol. Another interpretation sees the temple as a transitional zone. Perhaps it was used for rites of passage, birth, puberty, death, where the focus was not on external gods, but on internal transformation. No statues because the divine was already present in you. It could also have been a healing space. Ancient medicine and spirituality often overlapped. Patients or supplicants might have sat in the cool, dark chamber, waiting for dreams, visions, or whispering echoes to guide their treatment. The absence of images might have been intentional. Too much stimulation could interfere with the body's own signals. And then there's the most tantalizing theory of all this was a temple for a lost or forbidden deity. Something the Nabataeans revered privately but did not officially record. An older god perhaps from before Petra's rise, or a borrowed god not meant for public display. That would explain the structure's care, its orientation, and its secrecy. In 2007, a joint team of Jordanian and Italian archaeologists used thermal imaging on the rear wall of this chamber. They found a cold patch indicative of a cavity behind the stone. A week later, excavation revealed a shallow hidden niche, no bigger than a backpack. Inside, nothing. No relic, no bones, no scrolls. But the stone inside the cavity had black residue charred, but not from fire. Chemical analysis suggested the burning of aromatic resin. Frankincense, most likely. A purification ritual. Or an offering. Whatever was once placed there was carefully removed. Not stolen, not plundered. Removed with reverence. So the temple remains, empty, waiting. Some visitors report an unusual feeling when they enter. Not fear exactly, more like exposure, as if the space sees them more than they see it. You walk in expecting to be the observer and leave wondering if you've been observed. And here's the final twist. The temple's orientation aligns not just with the sun, but with a very specific star. Alnilam, the central star in Orion's belt. Every spring, just before dawn, light from Alnilam would pass directly through the temple's entrance for precisely 5 minutes. Coincidence or invitation? You step out of the temple slowly blinking in the sudden light. You feel like you've just left a conversation, even though no words were exchanged. The silence behind you is full, not empty. But Petra has more to say. Coming up next, a face in the cliff. Gigantic, weathered, and eerily human. Some say it's erosion. Others say it was carved with intention. Either way, it watches. If Petra's empty temple left you wondering who or what was missing, the next mystery gives you a face to contemplate. A face so large, so weathered, and so unexpected that you might not even notice it at first glance. But once you do, you won't be able to look away. You walk along a low ridge trail, now flanked by dusty scrub and wind-polished stone. The sun's angle begins to drop, drawing long shadows across the land like charcoal lines. The air grows cooler, and silence settles again, thick and golden. Just as you begin to lose yourself in the rhythm of footsteps and wind, a rock formation up ahead catches your eye. From the right angle, it looks like nothing more than a jumble of natural stone. But take 3 more steps, pause, and turn your head slightly to the left, and there it is. A massive face. The weathered guardian. Face, as some call it, is easily 20 feet tall, set into a cliff wall above a narrow pass. Its features are worn soft-edged from centuries of wind and sand, but unmistakably human. A broad brow, deep-set eyes, a solemn mouth, even a hint of a beard if you squint. You blink. Are you imagining it? You take a photo glance at the screen, and the face vanishes. On the screen, it's just rocks, random shapes, a shadow here, a curve there. But when you lower the camera and look again with your own eyes, the face returns. Historians still argue whether this is pareidolia, a natural coincidence of shapes tricking your brain, or an intentional carving. No tools marks are visible. No scaffolding would have reached that high without significant effort. And yet the symmetry is too compelling to ignore. Geologists point out that Petra's sandstone can fracture in clean lines and smooth arcs, especially under centuries of erosion. Maybe the face is just the result of nature's long, patient hand. But artists and mystics alike see too much character in its expression to dismiss it. Some say it resembles the storm god Baal. Others suggest Dushara, the chief deity of the Nabataeans, often associated with mountains and carved pillars. Dushara, whose name literally means the one of the Shara mountains, might well have been represented not by statues, but by the living rock itself. If so, the weathered guardian face could be more than an idol. It could be a sacred embodiment, a god shaped by wind, honored by silence. Others believe it's a sentinel, not divine, but protective. Perhaps carved by ancient hands to watch over a specific route, this narrow pass, where bandits once lurked and caravans passed by moonlight. The face positioned as it is above a choke point would have been a silent reminder you were being seen. There's also the chilling possibility that it wasn't meant for the living at all. One fringe theory suggests that the face wasn't positioned for human eyes, but for celestial ones. From above, its outline may have aligned with specific constellations. It's not impossible. Petra, after all, is full of star-aligned structures. A face turned toward the heavens meant not to gaze, but to be gazed upon. You inch closer, the gravel crunching underfoot, craning your neck. From here, the features are less distinct, just curves and hollows. But take a few steps back again, line it up just so. And there it is, watching, waiting. Some say the eyes follow you. Others say they disappear entirely when you blink. You laugh it off, but quietly. Because something about this face makes you want to whisper. A few years ago, a drone survey revealed a curious detail. Directly beneath the face, hidden in a narrow crevice, is a small, smooth depression just large enough to sit in, perfectly positioned for someone to look up and be seen. No inscriptions, no decorations, just the empty gaze of stone and the person below. A place for reflection, judgment, surrender. Nobody knows. But here's what's next. As you move past the face deeper into Petra's heart, you'll arrive at its most iconic building, Al-Khazne, the treasury. Tourists come for the columns and carvings, but what they don't expect are the voices. Because some visitors swear, the walls whisper. So far, Petra has kept its voice quiet, hidden in the scrape of wind, the hush of stone, the echo of old footsteps. But coming up next is where that silence breaks, not with a shout, but with a whisper. Because some visitors say the most iconic sight in Petra the Treasury doesn't just impress you, it talks to you. You know it the moment you turn the corner. There at the end of the Seek, rising like a stage backdrop made of pink gold light, is Al-Khazne, the treasury. Its towering columns and ornate facade emerge so suddenly from the canyon that you almost feel ambushed by beauty. Even after seeing it in 100 photographs, nothing prepares you for its scale, its presence. It feels alive. The structure is carved, not built, hewn from the living rock of the cliff face. Corinthian capitals, friezes, sculptures of eagles and mythic figures, a broken urn at the top. It's both wildly theatrical and unnervingly precise, like someone tried to recreate Olympus using only a hammer and divine ambition. But despite its grandeur, it's not the visuals that haunt people. It's the sound. You step into the wide, sunlit plaza in front of the treasury, joining the trickle of other visitors milling about in quiet awe. Everything feels calm until you stand near the center of the open area, look up at those massive doors, and hear it. A whisper. Not constant, not even clear. Just occasional syllables like breath, caught in stone. A few letters, a fragment of tone, something brushing the edge of your hearing. You turn. No one's near enough. The plaza is mostly empty. But it comes again, soft, urgent, indecipherable. Historians still argue whether these reported whispers are auditory illusions, architectural flukes, or outright fiction. Skeptics point to the curved walls of the plaza, which may bounce sound in strange ways. Even a far-off conversation could seem nearby. Petra, after all, has no shortage of natural acoustical tricks, but believers think otherwise. Stories go back generations. Traders camping outside the treasury at night spoke of murmurs from within, like someone pacing inside the walls, muttering. A voice too soft to understand, but too real to ignore. One chilling account from 1899 comes from a British traveler who swore he heard a man reciting verses in a language he didn't recognize, then silence. When he asked his guide, the man simply nodded and said, "They are still guarding it." Guarding what theories abound. Despite its name, the treasury was almost certainly not a bank or royal vault. The urn atop its pediment was once believed to contain Pharaoh's gold, a rumor so persistent that it still bears bullet holes from Bedouins trying to crack it open. But no treasure was ever found. So what was it? Some believe it was a royal tomb, though no bones were discovered inside. Others suggest it was a place of ritual transformation, where initiates passed from life into sacred memory. A spiritual threshold, the place you left your name behind. If that's true, then the whispers might be residue, a kind of sonic haunting, not malevolent, just persistent. The last breath of ceremony trapped in stone. In 2012, a group of French acoustic researchers set up sensitive recording equipment at the treasury's threshold. Over 48 hours, they captured dozens of unexplained sounds, none loud, but all strange breath-like puffs, low vowels, clipped syllables. Too structured to be wind, too soft to be chatter. Some scholars speculated that the unique geometry of the plaza, wide shallow, framed by rock, might create an echo loop, a sonic mirage. You hear what's already been said, just much, much later. You step closer now, feeling your heartbeat slow in the dry air. The treasury's entrance yawns open, like a throat, the chamber inside dim and cool. You can't help but whisper, "Hello, silence." Then so faint you're not sure it's real, something that sounds like low. You freeze. Say it again. "Hello." No reply. You step back, uneasy. Others have reported hearing their own names, or sounds that mimic a loved one's voice. One woman swore she heard her father calling her 10 years after his death. Another man claimed the whispers weren't random, but pleading. "Stay," they said. "Stay here." One thing is clear. No two visitors hear the same words, or any words at all. It's as if the walls only speak to those who are willing to listen, or who need to. As the sun shifts, shadows climb the treasury's face. The whispering stops, or maybe it just hides again deep in the stone, waiting. But you don't wait, because up ahead is something even stranger. A doorway sealed tight, not carved from Petra's iconic red stone, but black, jet black. And that stone doesn't match anything else in the region. The question is no longer just what's behind the door. It's where did the door even come from? So far, Petra has delivered strange sounds, vanishing symbols, and hollow sanctuaries. But coming up next is something tactile, physical. You can touch it, press your hand against it, and feel that it doesn't belong. Because just beyond the treasury, tucked into a shaded cleft, is a door made of the wrong kind of stone. A black stone doorway that Petra never should have had. You move around the rear slope that curves gently away from the treasury's main stage. The crowd's thin. The air cools. Dust clings to your boots as the canyon narrows again into a quiet passage of ochre and gold. And there, half hidden behind a weather-worn boulder, is the doorway. At first, it's unremarkable. A rectangular portal just 4 feet high, framed by what appears to be a natural fissure in the rock. But then you notice the color. Unlike the warm, rose-hued sandstone of Petra, this doorway is surrounded by deep, volcanic black stone. You crouch beside it and brush the surface with your fingers. The rock is cool, smooth, and somehow heavier feeling than the stone around it. Not just darker, denser. That's when it hits you. This stone isn't native. Petra's surrounding geology has been thoroughly studied. The region contains mostly sandstone with some pockets of limestone. But this looks like basalt or obsidian, volcanic in origin. And there are no known volcanoes anywhere near Petra. Not for hundreds of miles. Historians still argue whether the black stone was imported or if it's something else entirely. Some propose trade routes as the explanation. The Nabataeans were master merchants, their caravan networks stretching across the Arabian Peninsula into Africa, Mesopotamia, and beyond. Could this stone have been brought from Yemen, Ethiopia, or even deeper into the Arabian Shield? If so, it would have taken immense effort. Why haul an exotic, heavy, brittle stone across a desert just to seal a tiny door? Because clearly, it was important. The doorway itself is sealed. Not bricked up, not caved in, sealed. The stone has no visible seams, no hinges, no signs it was ever opened. It fits so perfectly within the carved entrance that even a slip of paper couldn't slide through. And that's where the mystery deepens. Ground-penetrating radar performed discreetly in 2015 by a European academic team revealed a hollow space behind the stone. A chamber roughly the size of a walk-in closet. Empty, apparently, but there's no way to confirm without opening it, which so far no one has dared to do. Local lore says the doorway guards a sacred relic. Some whisper it's the stone heart of Petra, an object of pure black said to vibrate when touched, to reveal truths or deaths depending on the bearer's fate. Others claim it's a tomb not of a person, but of a curse, something sealed away by the ancients, not out of reverence, but out of fear. You sit beside the doorway for a moment. The canyon is still. Even the wind is silent here. You press your ear gently to the stone. It's cold. And there it is. Not a voice. Not quite. But a hum. A low, steady tone, not audible so much as felt. Like your bones are picking it up just under your skin. You pull away quickly, heart thudding. It could be nothing. Echoes of your own breath. A trick of posture. But what if it isn't? One fringe theory suggests the black stone resonates with subsonic frequencies, natural or artificial, a kind of ancient frequency lock. Only the right chant pitch or vibration could open it, like a key made of sound. More grounded researchers have proposed It's a symbolic seal. The black stone representing death, the unknown, or divine silence. The room behind it may have once held sacred scrolls or talismans meant to be preserved, not accessed. And then there's this, a tiny inscription above the doorway, barely visible, faded almost to invisibility. It reads in Nabataean Aramaic, "Not meant for now." Just those 4 words. Not meant for now. A message, a warning. You stand up, slowly brushing the dust from your knees. There's no sign the doorway has ever been tampered with. No scratch marks, no tool traces, just time and patience. And as you turn to leave, you can't help but feel that whatever is behind that black stone is waiting, quietly, unmoved by centuries, not forgotten, just paused. And Petra's riddles keep coming, because just over the next ridge is a massive pillar of stone only partially carved, a monument that was started with clear intent and then simply abandoned. The unfinished obelisk, like a sentence with no ending. A sealed black doorway is one thing, but Petra doesn't just hide what's forbidden, it also reveals what's forgotten. And just beyond that mysterious entrance lies something equally perplexing, a colossal pillar, half-shaped, left behind in the middle of its creation. It's called the unfinished obelisk, and it raises a deceptively simple question. Why did they stop you follow a narrow winding trail up a slope that locals call the shoulder of the lion, for reasons that become clear as soon as you glance at the horizon? Jagged rocks and outcroppings form a crude silhouette of a reclining feline, its head angled westward as if watching the city's edge. And nestled in the crook of its back on a terrace of solid sandstone lies the mystery. The obelisk is huge, at least 50 feet long, and easily 8 feet wide. It lies flat, still connected to the rock beneath it. Unlike Egyptian obelisks, which stand upright and proud, this one never made it to vertical. It's still asleep in the stone, still dreaming of being finished. You walk its length slowly. The carving is clean, intentional. The lines are straight, the corners squared off. Someone started this with serious purpose. But then, they stopped. No cracks, no collapse, no tool damage, just a perfect half-born monument. Historians still argue whether this was ever meant to be an obelisk at all. The shape fits, but there's no inscription, no ceremonial base nearby, no evidence of its final destination. Some believe it was a royal monument intended to mark a ruler's death or a city's expansion. Others think it was a column for a grand new structure that never materialized. But the fact remains, the work halted suddenly, and no one knows why. You squat near the edge and examine the carving marks. They're sharp, clean. The stonemasons here were skilled, and yet, as you scan the surface, you notice a strange groove, an intentional cut about halfway along the length. A notch, deep and wide, not decorative, structural. One theory is that the notch marked a flaw, a vein of weak stone discovered too late. If so, continuing the work might have risked a break during transport or erection. Abandoning it would have been the only logical choice. But if that's true, why didn't they try again elsewhere? Petra is full of stone, and the Nabataeans were not easily discouraged. Which leads to a more unsettling possibility: something happened. There's no sign of battle here, no burn marks or burial. But oral legends speak of an interruption, a sudden event unnamed, unrecorded, that made workers flee. Some say it was a solar omen. Others, a red wind that came in the night and caused the air itself to hum. Fringe theories lean even further into the surreal. One claims the obelisk was never meant to be finished. that it was a bound monument, a relic of a vision seen in ritual but forbidden from being completed in the real world. To carve the whole thing, they said, would invite the eye of what no one says. You trace your fingers along the edge again. The stone is warm, solid, still ready after all this time. And that's perhaps the most haunting part. This monument could still be finished. Pick up your chisel and you could carry the work on. The lines are there. The shape is waiting. All it needs is purpose. But that's not your task today. Instead, you step back, letting the sun catch the angled cut. For a moment, the light divides the stone into past and future, what it was and what it might have been. You turn away, because Petra has one more riddle lined up, and this one doesn't deal in the unfinished. It's a burial site, or rather, it should be, because up ahead is a tomb, grand enough to house a king. But inside, not a single bone. So far, Petra has offered you echoes guardians and ruins suspended in mid-thought. But what comes next is a question of presence, specifically its absence. Because just over this ridge lies a tomb fit for royalty, yet eerily immaculately, completely empty. As you descend from the plateau, where the unfinished obelisk lies dreaming in stone, the trail bends downward into a sheltered canyon pocket. It's quiet here. Even the wind seems hesitant, brushing the canyon walls in hesitant sighs. The cliffs open like curtains to reveal a structure that doesn't shout like the treasury or perch like the monastery it sits. Wide, grounded, humble in comparison, but unmistakably significant. You approach the facade rectangular doorway, minimal ornamentation, but finely carved. The entrance is framed by simple pilasters and a gently arched pediment above. Not flashy, but precise, thoughtful, purposeful. This is one of Petra's lesser-known tombs. No nickname, no postcards. Just a designation, Tomb 648, according to the catalogers. But among those who've studied it, it has a more poetic name, the Empty King. You step inside. The interior is cool and shadowed even under the bright desert sun. 3 chambers branch off from a main square room, all carved directly into the stone. The floor is flat. The ceiling's high. The smell, faintly metallic dust age, and something dry like old wood. There are no carvings, no urns, no burial niches, no bones. Historians still argue whether this was ever used for burial at all. The layout matches royal tombs from similar periods, complete with drainage cuts, ceremonial ledges, and channels to accommodate offerings or libations. But every archaeological probe has come up empty. Not just recently, always. It's as if the tomb was waiting for its occupant, who never arrived. You walk to the center of the room, listening to the sound of your footsteps. The acoustics are dead. No echo. The space swallows your noise like sand swallowing a coin. You say a name your own, and it vanishes instantly. The room refuses to speak back. That's when you notice something peculiar. At the center of the main chamber lies a single, flat stone slab, not carved into the floor. Resting on top of it, a rectangle about 2 feet wide and 4 feet long, smoothed but not inscribed. You run your fingers over it and feel faint indentations, almost like letters. You tilt your head. Not letters, numbers. 15 hash marks, just that carved in rows of 5 like a prisoner's tally on a dungeon wall. No context, no punctuation. 15, what days, sacrifices visitors, or years the tomb waited to be filled. One theory is that the person intended for this tomb died elsewhere, lost in battle, swept away by the desert, devoured by time. So the tomb became a placeholder, a promise, a stone silence in memory of someone whose body never came home. Another theory suggests the tomb was never meant to be filled, that it was symbolic, a ceremonial stand-in, a false tomb for a ruler who wanted to hide their real burial place. Decoys like this have precedent in ancient cultures. Pharaohs, emperors, even medieval kings were sometimes buried in secret to prevent looting. But if that's the case, why make this one so perfect? Some locals believe the tomb was always meant for the last king, a figure from Nabataean prophecy, who would return in a time of collapse, a restorer, a healer. The tomb is ready, they say, not because it failed, but because it waits. Then there's the most chilling hypothesis of all that the tomb was used, that the body once inside decomposed fully unnaturally fast, leaving no trace, no hair, no clothing, no residue. In 2003, a team from the University of Edinburgh conducted chemical sweeps of the tomb's surfaces. No signs of organic matter, none, not even microbial, as if the stone had been wiped, scrubbed by centuries or by intention. You step back slowly, eyes adjusting again to the desert brightness. Behind you, the tomb looms in stillness, clean and silent as a forgotten promise. You wonder if someone someday will enter it and belong, or if it will remain eternally vacant, Petra's pristine riddle. And now as the sun begins to lower, casting longer, more angular shadows across the canyon, you make your way to something even stranger. A carving that only appears once a year, at a very specific moment, and then vanishes like a ghost in stone. Empty tombs are eerie, but what's coming next is even more elusive because you can't even be sure it exists. A figure etched in stone so faint it disappears in sunlight, invisible unless you're standing in the exact right place at the exact right time. Locals call it the disappearing petroglyph, and it only shows itself once a year. You climb along a quiet ridge, one of Petra's lesser-used trails that wraps behind the monastery and slips away into an elevated shelf of rock and thorny shrubs. The wind has picked up cooler now, but dry as ever. You squint against the sun and check your position. There's no sign, no marker, just a notch in the cliff wall, ahead a natural hollow, like someone took a bite out of the stone. It looks like 100 other geological quirks scattered across the region, but this one holds a secret. You step into the notch. Inside, the space feels almost sculpted, just big enough to shield you from the sun overhead. The rock surface here is smooth, like it's been touched too often, rubbed by time or reverence. You run your fingers over it and feel the faintest indentation, a groove no deeper than a strand of hair. You lean back, and there it is. Faint, fragile, hovering just above the surface like dust caught in a beam of light. A figure not detailed, but unmistakable, a person, with outstretched arms, palms up, a crescent at the feet. It flickers, then vanishes. You shift again, leaning a little to the right, and the image returns. It's not an illusion, not a trick of shade and shadow. It's a real carving, but only visible from a very specific angle, and only during a narrow window of time. Each spring equinox around 4:15 p.m., the light hits this hollow, just right, throwing shadows into the groove and bringing the image to life for exactly 6 minutes. Historians still argue whether the petroglyph is Nabataean or even older. Its style doesn't match Petra's typical carvings. There's no inscription, no context, and nothing else nearby. Some suggest it may predate the city itself, evidence of an older culture that once inhabited or passed through the region. Others believe the carving was a secret ritual marker. The figure with raised hands could represent invocation or surrender. The crescent beneath might signify a lunar cult or possibly a symbolic doorway between worlds. There's one peculiar detail: the figure's arms are not symmetrical. The left is higher than the right deliberately, not clumsy carving, intentional. A few fringe theorists believe this depicts a solar alignment matching the movement of the sun as it arcs across the equinox sky, and the carving's placement. That's where it gets weirder. It sits on the back wall of a shallow niche, facing northwest, useless for day-to-day ritual work, not easily accessible, and utterly hidden for the rest of the year. Why carve something you can only see for 6 minutes on one day, unless that fleeting visibility was the ritual? Perhaps the entire point was that the figure could not be viewed at will, that you had to wait for it, that those 6 minutes were sacred, a whisper of divinity, or a moment of contact, never to be forced, only received. You sit quietly in the niche, watching the light shift. It's not equinox today, but even now, you can see the edge of the carving when the breeze moves the dust just right, just enough to believe it. In 1999, a Jordanian guide led a research team here and documented the petroglyph using raking light photography. The image, when digitally enhanced, revealed additional lines, possibly clothing or wings. One researcher insisted it resembled Mesopotamian depictions of protective spirits. Others thought it looked more like a desert shaman mid-trance. But no other example of this figure has ever been found in Petra. And here's the haunting bit. The carving fades more each year. Wind erosion, human contact, or just time. Someday, maybe within a few decades, it will vanish completely visible to no one, not even for those 6 sacred minutes. And when it does, the ritual dies with it. You reach into your pocket and find a pencil stub and scrap of paper. You try to trace what you see, but the angles are too subtle. The carving won't be captured. It's not meant to be portable, just witnessed and left alone. As you rise, brushing the dust from your clothes, you look around at the empty ridge. Nothing else here. No signs, no remains. Just silence and sun, and the slow hush of time. And up ahead, something even stranger. You'll soon encounter a series of tiny holes and shallow grooves carved high along a cliff face. Some say they were part of ritual sacrifices. Others, that the Nabataeans were building a calendar made of sunlight. You've just left behind an image so elusive it barely exists, etched into stone and vanishing into light. But now, you're about to confront a pattern that's boldly, insistently present, not a hidden figure, but rows of deliberate marks, incised high on the cliff face for all to see. And yet, no one agrees what they mean. You're headed toward one of Petra's quieter corners, a section less walked, less photographed. The sun angles low, now casting the rock in hues of bronze and lavender. This canyon wall rises steep and bare, almost intimidating in its sheer verticality. But as you scan its surface, something emerges from the monotony. Tiny holes. At first, they seem like natural pockmarks. But look closer, and you see order. The indentations no wider than your thumb form lines, then clusters, then rows. Not random, not natural. And interspersed between them, small rectangular grooves like notches carved by human hands. Too clean for erosion, too high for easy access. They begin about 8 feet off the ground and continue up the wall in a sequence that seems to defy randomness. This is what archaeologists call the ritual mark wall. But that's just the convenient name. The truth, no one knows what these are. Historians still argue whether these markings were part of ceremonial practice, a sacred scorecard of offerings, or, here's the real twist, a Nabataean astronomical calendar. The theory goes like this. These holes, these slots and divots, aren't markings. They're timepieces, light trackers. At certain times of year, solstices, equinoxes, even lunar events, beams of light would strike specific holes with uncanny precision. And if you'd spent enough time watching, you'd know exactly when to plant, when to gather, when to worship. You take a few steps back, eyes adjusting, brain ticking. If this was a calendar, it wasn't the kind you'd hang on a kitchen wall. It was a system tied to the sky, to motion to the patient rhythms of the earth. One that required you to look, not once, but over years, decades. Think about that, a people so in tune with the heavens that they used cliff walls instead of paper, shadows instead of ink, and yet. What if it wasn't a calendar? One competing theory argues these were platforms for ritual activity. Each groove or hole, they say, held a wooden peg or platform, a line of torches perhaps, or banners, or offerings hung like wind chimes swaying and clacking in the desert breeze. Their arrangement would mark specific festivals or ceremonies, sound and motion instead of light. You squint again, imagining long strips of dyed fabric fluttering in the canyon, painting the air with sacred color. Or bells, dozens of them tuned slightly differently, catching wind and echoing through the stone corridors like a chorus of spirits. But here's where the story bends once more. In 2008, a German research team scanned the wall and discovered magnetic anomalies clustered in the areas surrounding the holes. Not the holes themselves, but adjacent zones. Too small to be structural, too regular to be random. They posited that the holes may have once housed metallic inserts, copper rods perhaps, or iron pegs. Why, no one can say, but the implications are tantalizing. If light struck those metals at the right angle, they might shine like stars. You wouldn't just be looking at a calendar, you'd be staring at a mirror of the sky. The wall as cosmos, stone as sky, time made physical. You place your palm against the stone, aligning your fingers with a series of marks. They feel shallow, not weathered, deliberate. You can't help but imagine the artisan who chiseled them, eyes tilted skyward, calculating angles with no instruments, just instinct and inheritance. What they were tracking, we may never know. Solstice, equinox, the rising of a sacred star, maybe even Venus or Sirius gods in orbit. But there's one last curiosity. The highest marks, the ones no human could reach without scaffolding, form a spiral. It's hard to see unless you're far back. But it's there, a winding loop of holes that ascends and narrows like a shell, like time folding in on itself. Calendrical spiral ritual vortex, or just decoration. One theory rarely published, mostly whispered, is that the spiral wasn't meant for viewing from the ground, that it was made to be seen from above. By whom? That's where the whispers stop. You step back, letting your eyes blur slightly, allowing the pattern to sink into your vision, the way dreams do, shallow, at first, then deep, then gone. But there's no time to linger, because Petra's next act is a performance, and you're heading straight for the stage, a stone amphitheater where no modern mic has ever been used yet somehow. Every whisper carries. We followed Petra's symbols, light tricks, and vanished voices. But now, it's time to enter a space designed to be heard. A place where the city once gathered, not to whisper secrets into stone, but to proclaim. To speak, sing, or chant with a voice loud enough for hundreds to hear. What's coming next is Petra's Great Theater, and what makes it strange is not how it looks, but how it sounds. You follow a broadening trail that curves downward along the side of a low hill. The space ahead opens gradually, revealing rows of steps carved directly into the rock. Not laid stone, not assembled. Carved. Massive curving tiers of sandstone arcs wrapping into a perfect semicircle. The amphitheater. It's ancient, worn, and yet it still holds itself like it was built last year. Every seat lined up in clean precision, every level evenly spaced. From a distance, it resembles a sleeping shell tucked into the landscape. But it's when you walk down to the stage stand, dead center, where the sand is flattened from centuries of footsteps, that you realize something extraordinary. You speak, and your voice carries, not just a few feet. It carries to the very back row, 65 steps up. You try again, a whisper this time. Still it travels. Historians still argue whether this phenomenon is deliberate or accidental. The amphitheater has no modern sound system, no amplification, no hidden tricks, just stone shape and air. And yet its acoustics are better than many modern concert halls. Petra's theater isn't unique in design. It follows the general Hellenistic model with a semicircular layout and tiered seating. But what's unique is its material and setting. The stone amplifies differently here. The canyon walls act as secondary reflectors. The air thinner at this elevation adds another strange layer. Together, they create something scholars still haven't fully reverse engineered. In 1994, a team of Italian and Jordanian acousticians tested the site with calibrated sound bursts and meters. They found that even untrained human speech could travel clearly across all 4,000 seats. Whispers, claps, murmurs, they all echoed with startling fidelity. No artificial amplification required. One fringe theory claims the Nabataeans developed their own system of sonic geometry, a way of carving angles and surfaces that manipulated sound waves as precisely as we do with electronics. Others think they stumbled onto it by accident, then recognized the power and built around it. But here's where it gets eerie. Some sounds don't echo back. When researchers tried projecting recordings, music, speech, artificial noise, the amphitheater responded normally. But when local Bedouin elders performed traditional chants, specific refrains were swallowed. Not echoed, not distorted, just gone. One chant in particular used in morning rituals produced no return at all, as if the canyon refused to hear it. The elders took this as a sign of spiritual closure. Petra, they said, honors grief in silence. And there's another legend. It says that once a year, on the night when the Pleiades rise just before dawn, a single voice can be heard singing on the stage, though no one stands there. It's always the same melody, always wordless, always soft. Theories abound: a trapped spirit, a sound caught in some acoustic loop, or simply Petra remembering itself. You sit for a moment alone in the center. The stone beneath you is smooth from centuries of sandals and robes. The seat rows, though cracked and uneven, feel stable, like they still expect a crowd. The silence here isn't empty, it's charged. You can almost hear the past traders, laughing storytellers performing, maybe a priest reciting news or decrees. Petra wasn't just a place to hide in the rock. It was a city that spoke. And this amphitheater proves it. You whisper your name, and it travels. Not like in the treasury where it twisted and returned. Not like in the echoing alcove where it changed shape. Here it simply goes. Outward, upward, away. And as the sun dips closer to the horizon, casting long shadows over the stone rows, You rise. Your voice fades. But Petra's doesn't. Not yet. Because what's coming next is Petra's most unlikely miracle. A chamber that stays cool, even in the heart of the desert. With no breeze, no vents, and no explanation. You've stood where echoes carry across ancient stone and where whispers flicker into the air like sparks. But now you're headed into something quieter, stranger, more personal. Petra's mysteries don't always announce themselves with grandeur. Sometimes they sit still, invisible in plain sight. And what's coming next is one of its most unlikely wonders, a chamber that stays cool, unnaturally, impossibly cool, even in the peak of the desert sun. The trail narrows again, dipping slightly as it curls around a bend into a low ravine. You step between leaning walls of sandstone that almost touch overhead. The heat presses down like a heavy hand. Your shirt clings to your back. Dust clings to your ankles. You squint through the brightness and instinctively search for shadow. And then there it is, a recessed entry, rectangular and low. Not dramatic, not ornate, just there. You duck your head and step inside. Instant relief. The temperature drops by at least 15 degrees. Your skin prickles with sudden coolness. Your breath slows. The air is still and dry, but no longer oppressive. It smells like time dust, silence, and stone that hasn't felt sun in centuries. The chamber isn't large, perhaps 15 feet wide, 10 feet deep. The walls are plain, no inscriptions, no symbols. But the moment you enter, the sensation is unmistakable. This room should not feel like this. Historians still argue whether the chamber's chill is architectural or natural. Petra is known for its clever use of shade airflow and insulation. The Nabataeans understood how to channel water through rock, how to keep food fresh underground. But this chamber has no known vents, no skylights, no signs of a water system. It just stays cool. Always. The chamber's location is part of the puzzle. It sits beneath a rock overhang that shields it from direct sun nearly all day. But other rooms nearby, similarly placed, similarly carved, don't have the same effect. They stay warm, stale. This one doesn't. One theory suggests a kind of geological refrigerator. The particular composition of the chamber's stone may retain nighttime cold far longer than its surroundings. Another proposes that the chamber connects to unseen fissures in the rock, creating invisible air currents that slowly circulate coolness, like a stone lung, gently breathing in temperature and holding it. But there's a third theory, more metaphysical. Locals sometimes call this room Beit al-Rao, the House of Breath. They say it was used by Nabataean mystics and solitary priests, a space for vision quests, healing rituals, and dreams. They believed the chamber itself was alive in a way aware, responsive, and cleansing. Not haunted, not sacred exactly, but listening. You sit against the back wall and feel it for yourself. Not just the coolness, but the silence. There's no echo here. Your breath vanishes the moment it leaves you. You rub your palms together and hear nothing. Even your heartbeat seems quieter. Not slower, just quieter. One researcher in the 1970s spent a night in the chamber with a temperature logger. The data showed no significant fluctuation, not from evening to dawn, not even when outside temperatures dropped drastically. The room remained within a 2-degree range, unchanging, unbothered. Even today, the chamber baffles thermal imaging scans. The floor emits less heat than the surrounding terrain. No known material was used to line it. No special stone identified, just Petra's own flesh. You lie back, letting your shoulders rest against the wall. and for a moment you understand. This room isn't just cooler in temperature, it's cooler in spirit, in presence, in pace. It's a pause. In a city of performance echo and architecture that demands to be seen and heard, this is Petra's breath in. And yet, not all is peace. Some visitors claim that if you linger too long, the room becomes oppressive. That the air doesn't just cool, it presses in. That time slows in here, then stutters. A few have left shaken, claustrophobic, dizzy. Like the room was closing, one person wrote in a travel diary, but not physically. Like it was folding my thoughts. And then there are the dreams, reported by those who've napped inside, whether for minutes or hours. Similar dreams, always the same shape, a long hallway, flickering lights, voices whispering in a language the dreamer can almost, but not quite understand. A scholar once described the chamber as a stone sensory deprivation tank. Maybe that's all it is. Or maybe it was Petra's answer to retreat. Not a temple, not a tomb, but a mind space. A desert room that erases time long enough for something new to emerge. You stand feeling oddly refreshed. Outside, the sun still burns. The trail still waits. And so does one final puzzle. Because just up ahead is a path carved into solid rock. And according to every map, every geologist, and every compass it moves, we've passed whispers and walls, vanishing symbols, and cool-breathed chambers. But Petra has saved one of its strangest riddles for last. Not a sound, not a structure, a path. Solid carved stone, yet somehow it shifts. You're about to walk the road that doesn't stay still. Leaving behind the cool chamber, you stretch your limbs in the desert sun. The light seems brighter now, sharper, like the rocks themselves are exhaling. The path ahead narrows again, before widening into a terraced slope that's oddly smooth underfoot. No loose gravel, just sandstone under years of polishing footsteps. You follow the bend, and there it is, the shifting path. It looks normal enough at first, a gently curving walkway carved into the side of a sandstone ridge, lined with low retaining edges. It's about 4 feet wide, maybe 200 feet long, and angles downward at a shallow grade. You begin to walk it casually, letting your eyes wander over the distant cliffs. And then, you stop. Something feels wrong. Not dangerous, just off. You look back at where you started, and it looks different, only slightly, just enough that your brain hesitates. Was the curve always this sharp? Was that outcropping always blocking the view? You turn around and walk back to the start, exactly the same steps, same pace, same angle. And the view changes again. Historians still argue whether this phenomenon is visual, geological, or psychological. There are no mechanical elements, no moving pieces. The stone is solid, unbroken. But visitors for generations have reported the same thing. Walk the path forward and look back, it appears one way. Walk it backward, look again, and the landscape shifts. Some say it's a trick of perspective. Petra's canyons and ridges create false horizons. Shadows move unpredictably. Angles distort. Maybe the illusion is built into your own perception. But others believe the path itself responds to the seasons. In 2015, a team of archaeogeologists placed measurement pins at key intervals along the walkway. Over a year, they tracked micro shifts, millimeter changes in surface height and edge displacement. Every few weeks, the measurements changed, then changed back. The stone path seemed to breathe, contract, realign, not dramatically, just enough to bend a beam of light, alter a shadow, shift your memory of space. Another theory ties the shifting path to ancient Nabataean ritual. Some scholars believe it was used as part of a procession, possibly for new initiates or travelers entering the sacred zone. The subtle distortion may have been intentional, a psychological marker. You don't just arrive in Petra, you pass into it through a threshold that challenges your senses. You take another step, this time watching your shadow. It stretches unnaturally, like the sun has changed position, but the time hasn't. One engineer from the 1980s proposed that the path was carved on a naturally shifting substrate, some sort of deeper sandstone shelf that expands and contracts with moisture or seismic activity. But follow-up studies found no fault lines, no tectonic movement. The stone is steady. Only the experience moves. Then there's the spiritual interpretation. Local oral tradition calls the path al-mashraba, al-ghaiba, the path of forgetting. The story goes when the Nabataeans no longer trusted a traveler, they'd make them walk this path blindfolded. If the person could return to where they started without confusion, they were allowed to stay. If not, they were sent away. A metaphor or memory trick. You try the test yourself. You walk 20 steps forward, turn, close your eyes, walk 20 steps back. You open them. You're not where you started. Close, yes, but the incline is different. The shadow is different. The edges look off. You check your footprints. They've shifted too. This can't be right. And yet, here you are. Some claim Petra's builders encoded not just stonework, but geometry into their sacred spaces. Angles that defy perception. Walkways that never quite align. Not enough to unnerve you, just enough to disorient. To make you question how much of what you see is real. One last story survives barely in fragments. It says, this path leads to a spot where the land chooses your direction. That if you walk it on the first full moon, after the solstice, Petra will show you where to go next. Not metaphorically, physically. You'll feel your steps shift your body, tilt your eyes drawn to something you weren't looking for. And if you follow it, well, no one says what happens next. You reach the end of the path and look back one more time. And now it looks just like it did before. Perfectly still, perfectly carved, just stone, or not. Because Petra's final lesson is this: you never quite walk the same path twice. Even if the stone hasn't moved, you have. And now it's time to rest. Let's slow everything down. Let's wind this journey into sleep. The sun slips low behind Petra's cliffs, now casting violet shadows across the stone. The wind softens to a hush. You've walked through echoing canyons and breathless chambers, listened to voices stitched into rock, and followed a path that maybe, just maybe, was watching your steps. But now, the journey fades. Your feet are tired, your breath slow. The heat of the day no longer presses. It lingers like a gentle hand on your shoulder, reminding you that you're still here. Still grounded. The mysteries of Petra remain unsolved, unclaimed, and strangely kind. You don't need answers tonight. You only need stillness. Imagine the stars above now, one by one, appearing in the canyon's narrow strip of sky. Bright, patient, unbothered. Their light has touched these stones for millennia. It touches you now. Close your eyes and feel it, the cool stone beneath you, the hush of ancient air, the pulse of silence. You're not lost. You're simply paused. Let the sound of your breath echo softly against the canyon wall. Let your heartbeat slow to match the rhythm of old footsteps, those that followed you through the seek, and those still walking somewhere in memory. Let go of the questions. Let go of the time. Let sleep find you, just as Petra always does. If this journey through Petra stirred something in you, curiosity, wonder, maybe even a quiet ache, don't keep it to yourself. Share this video. Leave a comment. Tell me what you felt. Because Petra doesn't just whisper to travelers, it connects those who listen. And if you're ready for more stories carved in silence and stone, hit subscribe. The next path may be darker, but it's one worth walking together.